Hey guys, tonight we begin with the question. What if you had to survive the Ice Age completely alone? No clan, no fire circle, just you, the wind, and a world that wants you gone. So, while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first breath you take feels like punishment. It hits your chest like broken glass and pulls tears from your eyes before you've had time to think. You're lying flat in snow that's deeper than it looked, half buried in a world you don't understand. There's no warmth, no voices, no distant firelight flickering behind trees. Just you, the scrape of wind over ice, and a sky that seems determined to keep its secrets. Even the air smells indifferent, dry, ancient, and sharp with the scent of cold stone. You sit up slowly, because rushing feels like something you used to do when the stakes were lower. Everything about this place feels like it's watching, measuring how long you'll last. Your clothes are crude, made for someone smaller, someone used to this. A single animal hide wraps over your shoulders like it once belonged to someone else who didn't make it. Your fingers, already pale and stiff, grope the ground for anything that might pass for a weapon or tool. Nothing. Just ice-dusted stone and a few broken twigs that wouldn't last 5 minutes in a fire. The ache sets in quickly, not just the cold itself, but the kind that burrows deep into the joints, the kind that makes you think about stopping. But you've only just woken up here. Stopping isn't an option. Not yet. You try to stand. Your legs complain with the dull throb of muscles that haven't moved in hours, maybe days. The wind grabs at your pelt, flapping it against your back like a taunt. The silence is too clean. No birds, no rustling brush, no distant snapping branches. Just the faint hiss of snow shifting under its own weight and the sound of your own breath, shallow and loud in your ears. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you expect to hear people. Even strangers would be better than this. A snort from a reindeer, the murmur of a hunting party, even a child's cry. But there's nothing. It hits you harder than the cold itself. You're completely alone. In the distance, there's a line of trees, black and skeletal against the white. They lean like old men, stooped under the weight of their own ice. Between you and that forest lies open snow, flat, treacherous, and marked with a strange set of tracks. Wide, deliberate, and fresh. Too fresh. You crouch down, running a finger along the edge of one. The snow here is deep enough to swallow a grown man's foot, but whatever left these prints barely sank. It's large, fast, and light on its feet. You don't want to meet it up close. Still, standing still in this open space feels worse than taking a risk. You begin to move, following the path of least resistance, aiming for the tree line and hoping the cover will be worth whatever else might be waiting in there. The snow crunches with each step, a sound that feels much too loud. It doesn't take long for your body to start protesting. Your hands sting with a prickling burn as blood begins to move again, and your breath clouds around your face like steam escaping from cracked stone. Every step forward is a negotiation between energy and safety. You can't afford to move fast, but you also can't stop. By the time you reach the first trees, your legs ache from the drag of snow and your shoulders have gone numb beneath the hide. You pause beneath the branches, grateful for even the illusion of shelter. The wind dulls a little here, broken by the trunks and low-hanging limbs. And for the first time since you woke, the quiet feels less like a threat. Still, you listen. You have to. The forest has its own language. Pops, creaks, soft rustles that don't feel accidental. You wonder what's living in here. What's starving? What's territorial? And whether it's better to be above or below something on the food chain. You find a dip in the earth where the snow isn't as thick and crouch beneath an outcrop of rock that curves overhead. It isn't a cave, not really, but it gives you your back to the wind and a small patch of ground to sit without sinking. You rest your hand on your chest and feel your heart thudding like it wants to run ahead of you. The air smells different here, damp, mineral-rich, and layered with the musk of old fur. Something has bedded down near this spot before. Maybe it's safe. Or maybe you've just stepped into someone else's home. The day is already shortening. That gray light is slipping away like it's been rationed, and the forest begins to cast longer shadows that shift with the wind. You huddle deeper under the rock and try to tuck your hands beneath your arms, but it's not enough. Not close. You'll need fire, and you'll need it fast. But your hands are shaking, and your memory is useless. You've seen fire made, yes, but from a distance, always with someone else doing the work. Flint, maybe. Or a bow drill. Did they use bark? Dry grass? It all blurs now, details swallowed by cold panic. You reach into your tunic and touch something stiff against your ribs. Bark, pale curls of birch from earlier. You'd pick them without thinking, more out of superstition than strategy. Now they feel like the most valuable thing you own. You don't have tools. You don't have flame. But you have something dry, and maybe that's enough. You hold it in your palm and stare at it, willing it to mean more than it does. Around you, the cold keeps moving, patient and sure of itself. It doesn't need to rush. It always wins. You pull your knees close, trying to conserve what little heat your body has left, and glance back toward the edge of the woods where the snow flattens out again. The tracks are gone now, half filled with drift. Whatever made them has moved on or circled back. You can't tell. That thought settles deep in your gut and starts to tighten there. Night is coming, and without fire, it will be your last. You know that now, and knowing it doesn't help. There's only one choice left. You can't wait for the cold to decide your fate. You'll need to start before the dark swallows everything, before your hands lose what little use they have left. The bark won't burn on its own, but maybe there's something nearby that will. Something dry, something sharp. You lean out from your hollow, scanning the ground for anything that might strike or scrape or spark. You don't know how to do this, but you're going to try. You kneel in the snow like someone in prayer, except this god doesn't answer. Your hands are so numb, they feel like they belong to someone else. You've managed to gather a pathetic bundle of dry twigs and dead grass, coaxed from beneath logs and under patches where the snow didn't settle deep. It's not much, but it's all you've got. The birch bark curls like a ribbon in your lap, promising more than it probably can. Fire feels like magic, real, unreachable magic, and you are trying to invent it with nothing. Your fingers scrape at a piece of stone you found half buried near the tree roots. It's sharp enough to cut your palm when it slips, which you suppose is a good sign. Pain means blood, and blood means life, so the stories say. But there's no spark. You hit it against another rock, harder this time, and a flicker of dust dances into the air before vanishing without heat. You grit your teeth and try again. 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 It's hard not to feel ridiculous. There's a line between persistence and desperation, and you crossed it 20 minutes ago. The cold creeps up your spine in slow, measured increments. It doesn't surge or strike. It just waits. You rub your hands together, trying to remind them that they're still part of this equation. You can barely feel the bark anymore, or the stone. You curse softly under your breath, not loudly. You don't want to hear your own voice out here. It might remind you how small it sounds. You try to think, what did the old ones use? Was it flint against bone? Did they carry ember bundles tucked inside skins? None of that helps you now. You don't have the wisdom. You don't have the ember. Minutes pass, or maybe it's hours. The light shifts, the shadows stretch longer, and your breath fogs heavier. The bark is crumbling now, not burning, just breaking apart in your hands. Your last hope of fire sifting through your fingers like the thought of warmth itself giving up on you. You toss the stones aside in frustration. They land silently in the snow, their brief usefulness gone. There's no plan B. You never had a plan A. Your stomach lets out a slow, hollow groan that echoes in your chest. Hunger sneaks in beneath the panic. It's not sharp yet, but it's loud. The cold eats from the outside in, but hunger starts at the core and works outward. The combination is miserable. You feel brittle, stretched too thin, like your body might fold in on itself just to stay warm. You shift your weight to keep the blood moving. 1 foot at a time, small circles. Hands beneath your armpits again. It's not enough. You know it's not enough. But you keep doing it anyway. You scan the ground, not just for firewood this time, but for anything that might be edible. Roots, mushrooms, frozen berries. Nothing. You find a small patch of dark earth under a fallen branch and dig with stiff fingers until your nails split. The ground is frozen solid. Nothing will yield to you without tools. And tools are something you are supposed to inherit, not invent. Someone was supposed to teach you. Someone was supposed to hand you a fire starter and say, "Here, this is how you don't die." But they're not here. And the silence is starting to sound permanent. The sky above turns from iron gray to something darker, violet at the edges, with a haze that promises snow. Not a storm, not yet, but enough to steal your chances. You think of animals, foxes curling into themselves, wolves padding through the dark on soundless feet. They were born knowing how to survive this. You weren't. You're soft, upright, fragile in ways fur can't fix. You huddle under the same overhanging rock from before and feel the bark press against your hip. It's useless now, but you keep it anyway, like a charm. Maybe later it will matter again. Maybe not. Your breath is all you can hear now. The forest has gone still. Even the wind feels like it's watching. You curl tighter, chin to chest, trying to mimic the posture of something that knows what it's doing. But this isn't instinct. This is mimicry. You're pretending to be a survivor, pretending to be part of a world that eats people who pretend. Your thoughts start to wander. You remember warmth, not just the physical kind, but the nearness of other people. Someone passing a carved bowl of broth, the weight of a hand on your shoulder, feet beside yours under thick furs. It was never much, but it was everything. You'd trade all of it now for one glowing coal, one breath of smoke, one familiar voice in the dark telling you they've got the fire going. But there's no fire, just your own breath curling and vanishing in the cold. You press your forehead against your knees and try to slow your thoughts. You know you can't afford to sleep, not without shelter or flame, but your body doesn't care. It wants rest. Your mind drifts in flashes, half dreams of hot stones and roasted meat, of laughing faces and steaming water dripping from pine needles. None of it is real. You blink them away and stare at the forest. Somewhere between your shivering and your hunger, a new idea forms, not useful, not comforting, but honest. If you can't make warmth, maybe you can find it. Not from flame, from life. Something out there is alive and moving. Something warm-blooded. Something that eats and runs and leaves tracks in the snow. You won't outlast the night by wishing. You'll have to track it, stalk it, take what it has, and make it yours. It starts as a dull ache, a hollow pressure beneath your ribs, but before long, it begins to shape your thinking. Hunger stops being a feeling and becomes a compass. It doesn't just gnaw at your belly. It whispers behind your eyes, lingers in the way you look at everything around you. You stop caring what things are and start wondering whether they can be eaten. The lines between caution and desperation begin to blur, and it feels normal, which is maybe the most alarming part. You leave the shelter at first light, if you can call it that, just a watery gray lifting the darkness enough to see your breath and the vague outlines of trees. The snow has deepened, but your body's moving more now, legs sore but responsive. You walk not because you want to, but because sitting still feels like signing a slow, cold contract. The air is dry, biting, but you've gotten used to the sting of it. Or at least you've made peace with it, the way people make peace with pain they can't avoid. You follow tracks. Not the heavy ones from before. Those vanished in the wind, but smaller prints. Close together, dotted with tiny claw marks. A rabbit, maybe. Something fast, nervous. You crouch, touch the edge of the print, feel nothing but packed snow. Your stomach clenches. You've never hunted alone. You don't even know what you'd do if you caught something. But that doesn't matter now. Hunger isn't waiting for you to work out the details. Hours pass like that. Low crouches, careful steps, always following something that's always a little too far ahead. You step around broken branches, flatten yourself near old trees, pretend you're part of the forest. You don't remember learning how to do this, but it's there now, stitched into your bones like muscle memory from an ancestor you never met. A part of you that was always waiting for the moment you were hungry enough to use it. Eventually, you spot it. A small creature, brown and quick, darting between drifts. Its ears flick nervously, and it moves with the energy of something that knows it's being watched. You freeze, breath held tight in your throat, afraid even the sound of your heartbeat might betray you. It pauses, nibbles at something under the snow, and for a moment you believe, just briefly, that you could catch it. You lunge. It hears you before you're halfway there, of course, and by the time you hit the snow, all you're holding is cold air. It vanishes into a thicket like it was never there. You lie in the snow, chest heaving, arms aching, and scream silently into your arm. Not because you failed, you expected to fail, but because the thing you chased was so alive, so warm, and now it's gone, and you're still not. You get up, brush snow from your knees, and press on. The thicket leads to a frozen creek bed, mostly buried beneath snow. You follow the depression, hoping it leads to something else alive. Your hunger is louder now. It isn't just in your belly, it's in your limbs, your thoughts, the way you look at shadows. Every tree becomes a possibility. Every sound becomes a signal. You're becoming someone else. Someone leaner, sharper, not smarter maybe, but hungrier. By midday, you spot a patch of movement up ahead. Not a rabbit this time. Bigger, slower. A carcass, half buried under snow, ribs jutting out like a broken cage. You don't know what killed it. The tracks around it are messy, indistinct. Claw marks, drag lines. Not fresh, but not old either. You hesitate, scanning the trees. There's no blood on the snow anymore, just patches of pink ice and bone. But the meat is still there. You approach cautiously, keeping low. The animal, some kind of reindeer, maybe, has been opened from the flank, like something tore into it without much planning. What's left isn't pretty, but your stomach doesn't care about aesthetics. The smell hits you first, sour, oily, still strong enough to make your nose wrinkle. You crouch, hand trembling, and tear away a strip of muscle that's already started to stiffen. You don't think. You just eat. It's horrible. Cold, stringy, metallic. It doesn't taste like food, not really. But it tastes like the opposite of dying. You chew fast, not because you're rushing, but because you don't want to feel it in your mouth longer than necessary. You don't stop until you feel sick. Not full, just enough to stop the spinning behind your eyes. Your hands are sticky with fat and frozen blood. You wipe them on your tunic, swallow hard, and try not to think about what you've just done. This is survival, you tell yourself. The stories never describe this part. There's noise behind you, branches creaking, snow shifting, and for a moment, your spine locks. You're not alone. not entirely. You rise slowly, glancing over your shoulder, but see nothing. Still, you feel it. That something has your scent now. That you've taken meat from something that didn't finish eating. You step away from the carcass, quickly, eyes scanning for a new place to disappear. You don't want to meet whatever left it behind. As you walk, the nausea fades, but something else takes its place. A strange calm. You feel less like a person and more like an animal. A quiet part of you understands now why hunters walk the way they do, why they crouch for hours without moving, why they stare at snow like it's full of secrets. Hunger doesn't just change your body, it rewrites your instincts. It teaches you a new kind of language, one spoken in silence, in sense, in how you breathe when you're afraid. You reach a hilltop by late afternoon, the light beginning to slide back toward dusk. From here, you can see the full sweep of the valley. It's beautiful in a brutal sort of way, wide and white, the forest curling along the edges like black smoke. Somewhere out there, more animals are moving, hunting, surviving. You're not alone in your hunger, not even close. And now that you've eaten, really eaten, you're part of that same web. That same cold, quiet logic that governs everything out here. But food alone isn't enough. You're learning that. The cold is clever, and your body still feels like a question mark curled in on itself. If you want a second day, you need more than meat. You need warmth, and you need safety. And if you're going to stay ahead of whatever's watching from the trees, you'll need to start thinking like it does. The first true night comes without ceremony. One moment there's a pale, watery light, and the next, it's simply gone, sucked out of the sky like someone pinched the wick. No stars, no moon, just a thick dark that sits over the forest like fur. It isn't quiet. The wind never fully stops in this part of the world, but it changes character after dusk. It loses its sharp edge and grows low and steady, like a voice humming behind the trees. It carries with it strange sounds, distant cracks, soft crunches, the kind of noises that don't fit the rhythm of snow or branches, that feel out of place no matter how you explain them. You sit with your back to a tree, legs drawn up, arms tucked inside your tunic, to chase after whatever heat is left. There's no fire. You weren't able to make one, not yet. You've tried the stones again, your fingers raw from the effort, but all they gave you was a shower of dust and disappointment. So instead, you rely on stillness. You build yourself into a ball of breath and bone and try to become smaller than the cold. The snow has begun falling again, softly this time, more like ash than flakes. It lands on your eyelashes and clings to the animal hide draped over your shoulders like a second skin. You don't brush it off. Let it settle. Let it become part of you. In the dark, your other senses begin to wake up. You smell the bark of the tree behind you, musty and slightly sweet. You hear the soft creak of frozen branches flexing above. You taste your own breath as it returns, stale and sour with old hunger. But most of all, you listen. It's a different kind of listening than during the day. This isn't about hearing the obvious. It's about tuning yourself to the murmur beneath things, the almost sound of pressure shifting, of fur brushing over ice, of something watching from just beyond the line of sight. That's what you start to notice most, the feeling of being observed. It comes in waves. First a prickling at the back of your neck, then a tightness in your jaw. You hold your breath and turn your head slowly, trying not to disturb the air. Nothing, but the feeling doesn't fade. If anything, it becomes sharper. You blink and try to reset your senses, but it's still there, that invisible weight in the dark pressing from the edges. There are creatures in this forest that you've never seen, not even in stories. You know bears, you know wolves, but there are other things out here, things that don't have names in the fire circle songs. Once, there might have been tales about them, but if there were, they weren't passed down to you. And now you're sitting in their dark, trying not to breathe too loudly. It's not that you believe in monsters. It's that belief feels irrelevant out here. The forest doesn't care what you think is real. Far off, there's a call. Not a howl. Not exactly. It rises and falls in uneven pitches, like someone dragging a bone flute across the mouth of a cave. It echoes strangely, too slowly. You grip the nearest rock without thinking, as if it might shield you from the sound. It doesn't come again, but it leaves a tremble in your knees that you can't explain away. You stay where you are, unmoving for what feels like an hour. When you finally do shift, it's only because you have to. Your legs are cramping. Your toes feel distant and wooden. You rise carefully, testing the ground. There's a faint path worn between trees, maybe from elk or from something else that moves often in the dark. You follow it because it's the only sign that anything survives out here. You walk slowly, placing your feet in old prints, trying to stay silent. Not because you want to sneak, but because you want to disappear. Around a bend in the trail, you spot something strange. A tangle of sticks woven between two trees, like a loose basket or a bird's nest, far too large. It's old, brittle with frost, and half collapsed under snow, but unmistakably shaped by hands. Or something like hands. You don't approach it. You just stare from a distance, your breath catching. It's not yours. It's not natural, but it's here. Maybe someone else walked this way long before you. Maybe something else built it. Either way, it means you're not the first to pass through this cold blindfold of forest. You keep walking, the shape burned into your mind even after it's lost behind the trees. Eventually, you find a low spot between roots, sheltered enough to block some wind. You press yourself into it, tucking your knees tight, wrapping the hide around your head and chest. You don't sleep. You drift, half conscious, half aware, caught between memory and instinct. Your dreams are strange, full of glowing eyes and flickering shadows, of fireless warmth, and a sound like stone grinding on bone. Once, you think you hear footsteps nearby. Not animal steps, human ones, slow and deliberate. You don't move. You barely breathe, but nothing happens. No figure appears. No voice calls out. After a while, even that sound slips away into silence again. Time loses shape in the dark. The minutes stretch, flatten, bend back on themselves. You count heartbeats until you forget the number. The cold never leaves, but you learn how to fold yourself around it, how to ignore its teeth. Your body becomes a tool, an object, something that carries you through the night, nothing more. And in that mindset, something shifts. You stop fearing the dark, not because you trust it, but because you've learned it won't explain itself, no matter how long you beg it to. Eventually, a sliver of light returns. Not warmth, not yet. But the sky lightens slightly, from black to charcoal to a hesitant gray. The forest looks different now. Still strange, still vast, but less haunted. More like a place you can walk through without asking permission. You rise slowly, stretch your arms, and feel the stiffness settle into your joints like old ash. But the tracks you left last night are no longer there. Something walked across them. Something heavy. The snow is disturbed in a wide arc not far from where you slept, but the prints aren't yours. They move in a circle, then vanish into the trees. You feel it again, that familiar itch along your neck. You weren't alone last night. You may not be now, which means it's time to stop thinking like something that hides. If you want to stay ahead of whatever else is moving through this forest, you'll need to become something that hunts. You begin by mimicking the cold. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't stumble. It just seeps, slides, surrounds. You decide to move like that. From now on, you'll be deliberate, quiet, almost invisible. Your boots press evenly into the snow, each step measured so it doesn't crunch more than necessary. Your eyes adjust to the half-light. trained now not to look for beauty or shelter or even direction, but for movement, for a flicker in the trees, a weight shift behind the underbrush. The forest starts to feel less like an enemy and more like a puzzle you might one day solve. You crouch behind a drift, waiting. A sound just to your left, a bird lifting off from a branch, and you don't flinch. That's what prey would do. You stay still and watch the way the branches sway afterward, learning how long the movement lingers, how the snow reacts. It's a lesson you couldn't have understood yesterday. Yesterday, you were prey. Today, you're not sure what you are, but you know it has teeth. You find fresh tracks mid-morning, deer, maybe, deep and narrow, angling downhill. You crouch beside them, studying how the hooves splayed slightly on the slope, how the belly dragged faintly against the snow. The animal was heavy, moving carefully, not running. You look ahead, scanning for broken branches, scat, the way the snow has been kicked aside. It's like reading someone else's story, one step at a time. And you begin to realize something unsettling. This isn't difficult anymore. It's not easy, but it's natural. You're starting to feel how the forest moves. You're no longer walking through it like an outsider. You're part of it now. The scent of something musky hits your nose as you push farther along the trail. Not fresh, but not old either. You pause, take in the direction of the wind, and shift your angle accordingly. A predator wouldn't walk with the wind at its back. You know that now. You don't know how you know it, but it's there, settled deep in your ribs like instinct finally waking up from a long sleep. In the distance, you hear something tearing, wet, rhythmic, and awful. You drop into a crouch without thinking, chest pressed close to the earth, head low. Ahead, between the trees, you spot it. A scavenger, maybe a cave hyena or something close, hunched over the remains of something bigger. Its shoulders rise and fall in sharp jerks as it pulls at flesh, its breath steaming around its muzzle. You stay perfectly still, just watching. It doesn't see you. Not yet, but you study the way it moves, the way it glances up after every few bites, scanning the woods with slow confidence. It's not in a rush. It knows it can fight for what it's found. You aren't planning to steal from it. Not today, but you're learning. Watching how it survives teaches you something new. Survival is about timing. When to risk, when to retreat, when to wait. That's what predators do. They're not just strong. They're patient. You back away slowly, quietly, and circle wide around the feeding site. Your path takes you up along a ridge where you find a patch of frozen moss under a wind-carved rock. You chew it without thinking. It tastes like nothing and fills you even less, but it keeps your mouth busy. Your body feels sharp now, more aware of its weight, its limits, its balance. Your eyes track movement almost before it happens. You find yourself anticipating shadows, not fearing them, anticipating them. You test your own silence by stepping between stones, avoiding brittle twigs. It becomes a game in a strange way. Can you walk 10 paces without a single crunch? Can you crouch and rise without shifting snow? You start moving with the kind of care you've only ever seen in animals, in stories told by older hunters with weathered eyes. You think of one, an elder whose fire circle stories always ended in a quiet kill and a satisfied nod. You used to listen, not quite understanding the rhythm of his pauses. You understand now. Each beat of silence held the shape of a lesson. Later that day, you come across another set of tracks, shallower this time, close together, possibly human. You study them, trying to read the story left behind. The stride is careful. The steps are straight. But there's a hesitation in one of them, a slight stagger where the foot turned inward, tired, maybe injured. You kneel, touch the print with your fingers, and feel a flicker of memory, not your own, but something deeper. The sense of being watched from the other side. You follow the tracks for a while, not because you're certain it's safe, but because you want to understand. Whoever made them stopped frequently, left occasional scraps behind, small impressions in the snow, like a pouch had been opened or rearranged. You find a strip of sinew, frozen stiff, still tied at one end. A sling, maybe, or a strap. You keep it, not because you need it right now, but because predators don't waste. By the time the light begins to fade, you've covered more ground than you ever thought you could. Your body aches in places it didn't know how to before. But your mind feels clearer, focused. The hunger is still there, of course, always. But it no longer drives you like a storm. Now it moves with you, quiet and sharp, tucked behind your ribs like a knife you haven't drawn yet. You find a place to sleep beneath a cluster of leaning trees where the snow has been swept by wind into a shallow bowl. You gather what you can for insulation, dry grass, crumbling bark, even a feather you found tangled in a branch. No fire again, but you don't tremble this time. You lie down slowly, pulling the hide tight around you, and keep your eyes open just long enough to feel the forest shift into its night rhythm. Somewhere out there, something howls again, closer than before. You don't flinch. You simply listen. And as the night deepens and the cold presses in from every side, you feel something else rising to meet it. Not warmth. Not quite. But a clarity, the kind that comes only when fear and instinct have stopped fighting each other. You've learned something crucial today. You're not prey anymore. But even the sharpest predator can only last so long alone. Sooner or later, the cold starts to press into your dreams, and your thoughts drift back to the smell of smoke, the sound of speech, the circle of light that once meant safety. As sleep pulls at your limbs and the trees sway gently overhead, you begin to wonder how much longer your mind can stay sharp without other voices to sharpen it against. The cold changes flavor as the days pass. It stops feeling like pain and starts feeling like subtraction. It doesn't hurt so much as erase. It dulls your edges, smooths your thoughts, softens the line between dreaming and waking. You walk through the snow on legs that belong to someone else, thoughts unraveling like loose threads from the hem of your mind. The forest looks the same in every direction now. Trees, snow, wind. Repeat. The only thing that seems to shift is you. You speak sometimes just to hear something. Not full sentences, fragments. Single words. A name, maybe. You don't know who it belongs to. Could be yours. Could be someone you haven't met yet. It sounds strange out loud. Too sharp. Like language was made for places with warmth and people. Here, the air doesn't seem to want your voice in it. You fall quiet again. Your memories begin to warp. You remember warmth that might not have happened. You recall a fire pit with red stones and a pot of boiling roots, and you can smell it, sharp and earthy, the steam hitting your face. But when you reach for the memory, it folds in on itself, showing you snow instead. A flat expanse, your own hands turning gray with cold. Sometimes you see people in the corner of your eye. You turn, expecting movement, a figure, a gesture. There's never anyone there. But you start seeing them more often. Shadows that seem to watch you from just beyond the trees. You talk to them. Not in full conversations, but enough to feel less alone. You ask questions and fill in the answers yourself. You hum under your breath. You find a rhythm in your steps, a beat in the crunch of snow beneath your boots. It helps, not because it's real, but because it feels practiced. Something in your brain likes patterns, even now. Maybe especially now. You haven't eaten in over a day. The last scraps of meat from your frozen find are gone. You gnawed a strip of leather this morning, chewing it soft enough to swallow, and it's sitting like stone in your gut. Your limbs move only because they remember how, not because you tell them to. Your hands shake too much now to tie anything, and the skin around your nails has split into red cracks that sting in the wind. But you're still upright, still walking. You find a pile of stones that looks too arranged to be natural. Not quite a structure, but something in between, a place where someone once sat. You kneel beside it and press your palm to the top rock, hoping it might still hold warmth. Of course it doesn't, but you stay there anyway. For a few minutes, you pretend there's a fire in front of you. You place your hands toward it. Let your shoulders relax. Imagine the way the heat would lick your skin, chase the numbness from your fingers. You remember firelight dancing across a face. You remember a voice telling a story, one you liked so much you forgot to be hungry. You remember someone laughing at the wrong moment. And then your eyes open, and there's only snow. You begin to wonder how long a person can last like this. Not just physically, mentally. If the body can move long after it's used up its reserves, can the mind do the same? You can feel yourself splitting, not broken, just blurred. Like the part of you that knows you're a person is watching from the outside now, waiting to see what's left. You pass a hollow tree and find carvings in the bark. Symbols, spirals, a handprint. You press yours over it, and it fits. Not perfectly, but closely enough. Someone else has been here. Maybe long ago. Maybe recently. The idea that someone survived long enough to leave a mark fills you with something dangerous. Hope. You sit under the tree until your teeth start to chatter again. And then you force yourself to move. Your dreams now come when you're awake. You see flickers of fire that aren't there. Faces in the trees. Footprints beside yours. It doesn't scare you. Not anymore. If anything, it comforts you. Madness is a kind of warmth. A soft blanket made of hallucinations and repetition. And you let yourself sink into it, not completely, not enough to let go, but just enough to stop being so afraid. If you can't find people, you can imagine them. If you can't make fire, you can remember it. Eventually, though, memory wears thin. It stops being enough. You wake one morning with frost on your eyelashes and a throb in your ribs that feels like morning. You're not going to make it alone. Not much longer. The forest has given you everything it's going to give. The tricks you've learned, the instincts you've sharpened, they can't replace what's missing. Hands, faces, shared meals, shared fire. Your body wants warmth, but your mind wants company. And that second hunger is harder to feed. You rise one more time, legs heavy, joints stiff, and look across the ridge. In the far distance, you spot something unnatural. Just a faint line of smoke rising between the trees, barely visible in the pale sky. Your chest tightens. It might not be real, but if it is, it changes everything. You start walking toward it, not with urgency. Not yet. You don't trust the feeling enough to run. But you walk with direction for the first time in days. Whatever waits out there, whoever waits, it won't be a fire you built or a shelter you found. It'll be other people. Real people. And if they take you in, you'll learn again what it means to live as part of something larger than your own breath and heartbeat. You'll learn how survival looks when it's shared. That smoke in the sky may lead you to something ancient, something older than memory and deeper than instinct. A community, a circle. And in that circle, you'll find Cro-Magnon faces watching you carefully, waiting to see if you belong. You keep moving toward the smoke, like it might vanish if you stop looking. Your legs are stiff, your eyes dry, your thoughts bleached thin from days of solitude. But the column is still there, faint and silver against the pale sky. It rises in a tight thread, not wild enough to be from a fire gone wrong, not thick enough to be from trees burning, controlled, steady, made by people. That much you can feel. Smoke has its own language, and this message is clear. Someone nearby knows how to survive the cold, and they're doing it with fire. By the time you reach the edge of their territory, your mind is running ahead of you, imagining the smell of cooked meat, the glow of amber flames, the sound of someone else's voice. You follow the trail without needing to think. Branches have been cleared. Footprints are deliberate. The path is organized in a way no animal could manage. You slow your steps, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of relief. After so much silence, the idea of seeing people again feels enormous. Unfamiliar. They see you before you see them. Of course they do. Cro-Magnon hunters aren't the sort to be surprised by a figure in the trees. When they emerge from the shadows, it's with deliberate calm. Two figures, one male, one female, both wearing layered furs tight to the skin and carrying spears they don't yet raise. They don't speak, but they don't need to. They read your posture, your sunken cheeks, the way you lean slightly forward like the wind might blow you back into the forest. You don't gesture. You simply meet their eyes. And after a long silence, they nod, barely, but it's enough. They take you in like a stray, not with warmth, not at first, but with practical mercy. You're guided down a narrow slope into a hollow between ridges, where a small band has set up camp. It's a winter shelter, compact, efficient, partly dug into the ground and insulated with hide and brush. There's smoke rising from a stone-ringed fire, and around it, the shapes of others, adults, children, elders. Their eyes track you as you arrive, but no one approaches. They wait for the hunters to vouch for you. And once they do, the space opens just enough for you to step inside. No one speaks, not in a way you recognize. But the language of the camp is clear. Body cues, gestures, the rhythm of breath. Someone hands you a strip of meat, already dried and tough. You chew without asking what it is. You eat with both hands. A fur is passed to you, heavier than the one you've been wearing. And someone gestures for you to sit near the fire, not close, not in the circle's heart, but just on its edge. You don't mind. Even the edge of the fire feels miraculous. You sit in silence as they eat, work, murmur to one another in tones that shift like wind through grass. It's not a language you understand, but it's not closed off to you either. You can feel the patterns, short sounds for tools, longer ones for stories, sudden clicks when something needs attention. They don't try to explain anything to you, and yet you begin to understand the rules. Move slowly, make space, observe before acting. You've lived by those rules for days already. The difference now is that you're not alone while doing it. As the fire dims to coals, the band settles into sleep without fuss. Skins are arranged, bodies curled together in arrangements that suggest long memory. Who sleeps near the entrance? Who curls around the children? Who guards the perimeter? You're shown a spot near the wall. No one says it, but you can tell. You haven't earned a place in the Corps yet. That will come, if it comes at all. You don't sleep for hours, not because you're afraid, but because you're full of something you haven't felt in too long. Watchfulness without dread. These people move like animals who've tamed their instincts. They breathe together, shift together. Even in sleep, they seem to communicate. You lie still, staring at the roof of woven branches overhead, and listen to the soft sounds of their night. Breathing, snoring, the occasional murmur of a dream slipping loose. You're not part of them yet, but you're inside the warmth of their world. Morning begins without conversation. The band rises as a group, stretching, rewrapping furs, checking gear. One of the men taps you on the shoulder and hands you a flint blade, not as a gift, more like a test. You take it with a nod, holding it carefully, and wait. They move out quickly, a loose column with practiced pacing, and you fall in line near the back. They don't correct your position. That feels like permission. The air outside is brittle, sharp with the kind of cold that cracks lips and freezes hair. But you barely notice. You're watching how they move, single file, deliberate spacing, pauses at intervals for scanning the horizon. They communicate with simple gestures. A hand held up means wait. A tap to the thigh means drop low. You copy them as best you can. When they crouch, you crouch. When they pause, you freeze. When one of them points to a trail in the snow, you lean forward and try to read it, even if it still looks like chaos to your eyes. Eventually, you begin to understand what you're looking for. Not just the tracks, but the patterns, the spacing between them, the broken branches, the direction of bent grass beneath the snow. They don't teach you with words. They teach you by letting you see what they see. If you miss it, they don't explain. They just move on. And you learn, quickly, not to fall behind. You hunt with them that day, not as a full participant, but as a shadow. You carry things. You help cut lengths of sinew. You listen. And when they bring down a reindeer just past midday, with a clean spear throw from one of the women, you help drag it back. They don't praise you. They don't thank you. But when they portion the meat, they place a strip in your hands like it belongs there. And you know what that means. Later, as the fire returns and the sky softens into evening, you notice something different. The children are closer to you now. One offers you a carved bone bead. You don't know if it's a gift or just something they're showing you, but you nod and hand it back carefully. The gesture earns you a smile. The hunters don't smile. Not yet, but they don't ignore you anymore. That night, when the fire is high and the cold scrapes softly at the outer walls, someone points to a spot closer in, closer to the fire. Not the center, but closer. You move there without a word. This time, no one watches to see if you'll stay. And in the low flicker of light, with the scent of cooked meat in the air and the sound of shared breath around you, you begin to understand what it means to survive, not just as a body, but as part of a circle. It doesn't take long for you to realize that the Cro-Magnon camp isn't fixed, it breathes. It folds and unfolds depending on the weather, the hunt, the rhythm of the days. Shelters can be built in a few hours, or expanded across several, layered with brush, fur, and stacked bones for windbreaks. Everyone participates. Even the smallest children carry stones or twist fibers. No one is idle. Even rest is purposeful, taken in shifts, nested against the fire in tight rotations. You begin to see the difference between surviving and living. These people live, even in this cold, even with death always walking nearby. The reindeer you helped carry becomes the center of the next 2 days. The kill is not just food. It's a project, a ceremony, a calendar of tasks. You helped skin it first, awkwardly, guided by nods and firm hands repositioning yours. The blade you're handed is small but sharp, its edge serrated with tiny notches made from constant sharpening. You scrape hide from muscle, separate fur from fat, careful not to waste anything. Nothing is discarded. The tendons will be dried for string. The hide will be scraped, stretched, softened. Even the hooves have a future, as tools, buttons, ornaments. Every part of the animal becomes something else. At first, you're slower than the others, but they don't seem to mind. They move around you like water, finding its way around a stone, accommodating, but not waiting. You begin to match their pace, little by little. Your movements stop feeling uncertain. Your hands remember the weight of the blade. Your eyes anticipate the next step before it's gestured. It's a kind of fluency, not with words, but with rhythm. The cooking is simple but deliberate. Stones are heated in the fire, then placed in pits to roast meat wrapped in hide. Smoke is channeled carefully through woven brush structures. You're invited to taste the first slice, and it's unlike anything you've eaten in weeks. Warm, slightly charred, rich with fat. You chew slowly, not just from hunger, but from the realization that you're being watched. Not with suspicion now, but with interest. A child passes you a sliver of fat wrapped in bark, and when you take it, the group returns to their tasks without pause. That's the moment you understand you're part of the meal, which means you're part of the group. The camp expands that day. New branches are cut, new frames assembled. The older members of the band take turns showing how the huts are lashed together. Bone pegs, sinew cord, grooves cut into the snow itself to anchor each structure. You watch, and copy, and improvise. You're given a task, shaping ribs from curved wood to reinforce a lean-to, and it's the first time no one checks your work. The trust is quiet, but unmistakable. Later, while drying strips of meat over a low rack, you glance around the camp and realize something strange. No one's giving orders. The work is constant, but unspoken. Everyone knows what must be done. They've grown into this pattern together, like threads twisted into rope. You begin to adapt to it, not by asking what to do, but by watching and stepping in at the right time. Fetching water, carrying wood, sharpening a tool. It's all seen. It's all noted, but no one says anything. When dusk falls, the camp draws in closer. The fire is built higher, ringed with stones, and you see how carefully it's maintained, fed not just with whatever burns, but in a specific order. Drier twigs, thick roots, even shavings of fat to keep it bright without wasting fuel. One of the elders marks the perimeter with bones, evenly spaced. You ask no questions. You've learned that questions here are mostly answered by observation. The kill is portioned again that evening, not by status, not by size, but by use. Those who hauled the meat receive generous strips. The fire tenders get first bites. The children are handed soft cuts, easy to chew. Even the dogs, small, sharp-faced animals more bone than fur, get their share, licking grease from bark bowls placed along the edge of camp. You're given your own piece, not as an outsider, not as charity. It's handed to you directly, without glance or ceremony. That's what belonging looks like here. You eat slowly, savoring it. The meat is rich and gamey, dripping with juices you'd nearly forgotten the taste of. Each bite is grounding. It reminds you that your body still works, still absorbs, still recovers. The warmth reaches your fingers. Your thoughts clear. You feel your shoulders relax for the first time in days. After the meal, the bones are sorted. Some are cracked open for marrow. Others are laid out to dry, already being considered for future tools. One of the younger hunters shows you how to strip sinew, pulling long threads from the meat with a twist of the wrist and a small hooked bone. He doesn't explain it. He just demonstrates until you copy him well enough. And then he nods once and moves on. That's as good as praise gets out here. And you feel it land like sunlight on frost. There's laughter, too. Small, understated moments. A boy trips over a pile of branches and makes an exaggerated face as he falls. Someone tosses a handful of snow at him, and the whole camp chuckles softly. The elder who's been watching the fire lets out a brief snort of amusement, then settles back into silence. The laughter isn't loud. Nothing here is. But it's real, and it spreads warmth in ways fire can't. The night deepens. The cold returns, but the shelters are solid now, padded with layered fur and snow-packed sides that hold heat surprisingly well. You're invited to sleep inside one of them this time. Not just under the stars. Inside, someone gestures for you to place your gear in the corner, and when you do, no one questions it. You lie down on a bed of woven brush and fur, belly warm, hands sore from work, and chest strangely light. As your eyes drift closed, you hear quiet voices, almost melodic, echoing gently through the camp. They aren't songs exactly, more like murmured patterns. You can't make out the words, but the rhythm lingers. It's not for performance. It's for memory, for comfort, for passing time the way people have always passed it. Together, around a fire, retelling the day through sounds older than speech. That rhythm pulls at you as you fall asleep, and you find yourself wondering what other songs you've forgotten, what stories the fire still holds. You wait before the sun, though it's hard to say what gave you the push. Your own breath curling hot inside the shelter, the rustle of movement outside, or the low murmur of voices already beginning the work of morning. The space inside the hut is still warm, a gentle contrast to the bite of air that sneaks through gaps in the fur walls. Beside you, someone shifts, pulling a hide tighter around their shoulders. No one speaks. The day doesn't begin with announcements here. It begins with motion. A new task, a fresh rhythm, another quiet morning that promises labor and warmth in equal parts. You crawl out carefully, hands sinking into the packed snow, and the camp greets you with firelight. Not the roaring kind, but low and steady, coals bright beneath new branches, radiating a glow that spills long shadows across the earth. A few people are already moving through chores, checking traps, stirring embers, shaping tools. A child leans against a parent's side, rubbing sleep from their eyes. The air smells like last night's smoke and the fatty haze of meat. You take a breath, and it fills your chest in a way the cold never could. There's an ease to this rhythm that you're beginning to crave. No one barks orders, yet everyone knows what to do. One of the women walks past you with a stack of long, peeled sticks bundled over one shoulder, balanced like she was born carrying them. A man crouches over a set of sinew lashings, retying knots with the precision of someone who's done it hundreds of times before. You watch the way he works, fast, not rushed, focused without strain. This is what it looks like when repetition becomes art. You offer to help and are met with a simple gesture, a wave toward the fire. It's not dismissal. It means they've already seen what you're ready for. Fire duty. You take up the task like it matters, because here it does. You feed the fire in careful intervals, learning how to listen to its breath. If you give it too much, it growls and wastes heat. Too little, and it sulks. You watch how one of the elders, a man with hollow cheeks and quiet hands, pinches bits of fat into the center of the flame. You try the same, and the fire rewards you with a clean, orange snap. He doesn't say anything, but his glance lingers an extra second. You've done it right. When the work slows, conversation begins, not with language you recognize, but with movement. Two young hunters begin to pantomime something from a recent hunt. One crouches, then leaps into the air with an exaggerated spear thrust. The other flails dramatically before collapsing into the snow. The group laughs, not loud, not long, but easily. Someone tosses a scrap of hide at the victim, and the laughter ripples again. You laugh too. You don't know if you're allowed, but no one stops you. The air feels warmer for it. Laughter here isn't about cleverness. It's about release. It's how the group stretches after a long tension. It slips out between tasks like steam from a cracked pot, subtle but constant. Later that afternoon, a small boy places something in your lap without a word. It's a piece of carved antler, smoothed on one side, decorated with a few scratched symbols. They look familiar, not because you've seen them before, but because they feel like something that has always existed. He doesn't ask for it back. He just nods once and runs off. You tuck the object into your pouch, not quite sure if you've been gifted something, or simply trusted to hold it for a while. In the evening, the fire becomes the center of everything. The camp narrows in around it like a closing flower. Children curl against mothers. Elders lean in to watch the flames. Hunters return with bundles of wood and damp furs. The light grows softer, flickering on faces, making everyone look more like each other. You sit near the outer ring again, but this time the space is tighter. You're not pressed away. You're held near the edge, not yet inside, but no longer outside. Then the humming begins. It starts with one person, always an elder, always from a corner of the fire. A long, low note, smooth and slow, like wind curling through a hollow tree. At first, it seems like nothing, a voice in thought. But then another joins, and another, each holding a slightly different tone. The result isn't harmony in the way you understand it. It's resonance, a sound that doesn't aim to impress. It just exists, layered, shared, unrushed. No one explains when you're allowed to join. No one gestures or encourages. But eventually, you find your own breath shaping to the same pace. You hum, not loudly, not confidently, just enough to feel the note vibrate behind your teeth. No one notices. Or if they do, they don't react. It isn't a performance. It's a form of timekeeping, of memory, of warmth made from sound. The hum rises and falls. It breathes. You realize it follows the rhythm of the fire. When the flame flares, the tones swell. When it dims, they taper. It's music designed to echo the world. Music that changes with smoke and ash. And beneath it all, your breath finds something it's been missing. Not a melody, but a heartbeat it can match. The humming fades without ceremony. One voice stops, then another, until only the crackle of the fire remains. The silence that follows is not awkward. It is full, a kind of rest. You sit in it like it's a blanket, the whole camp settling deeper into the night. A woman sharpens bone into a smooth curve. A child plays with stones, stacking them into small towers that tumble without complaint. There's no instruction, no interruption, just shared presence. You find yourself staring at the fire longer than you mean to. The flames stretch upward in thin spirals, licking the sky with a kind of patience. They remind you of the smoke you followed to this place, of what it meant to chase warmth when you had nothing left. That desperation feels distant now, like it belonged to someone else, but it still lives in your bones. It still wakes you with a chill in the middle of the night. This fire, though, this one stays. When the camp begins to sleep, it does so without a signal. One by one, people lie back against hides, arms folded over chests, legs curled inward. The sounds dwindle until only the fire whispers. You're handed a fur and shown a space between two others. No words, just a tap, a gesture, a place. You lie down and feel your breath match theirs, slow and deep. The night feels different when it's shared. Before your eyes close, someone at the far end of the shelter begins a low chant. Not a hum this time. Words. But not in any language, you know. The syllables tumble like water, slow and uneven, threaded with long pauses. It doesn't matter what they mean. You understand anyway. It's a story, not meant to teach or inform, but to anchor. A sound to sleep beside. A rhythm to dream with. You fall asleep to that rhythm, the heat of the fire still warming your cheek, the soft pulse of other bodies breathing around you, and the faintest hint of that old, wordless song still buzzing in your chest. You don't fully grasp how much the tools matter until you're asked to use one, and it cuts your hand. Not badly, just enough to bleed. The blade was sharper than you expected, honed so finely it parted hide without resistance, like slicing through soft bark. It's a flint knife with a chipped edge, barely as long as your finger, and it fits in the palm of your hand like it grew there. The edge glints faintly in the morning light, and the way it bit your skin wasn't clumsy. It was precise. It was a reminder. These tools aren't just functional, they're refined, evolved. The people who made them didn't simply survive the Ice Age. They adapted to it with art. The cut doesn't earn you scorn. One of the elders, a woman with hair braided into thick coils along her neck, takes your hand without comment and presses moss against the wound. She binds it with a strip of soft fur, tight but not painful, and hands the knife back to you. Not as a warning, as a lesson. You take it with both hands this time, and with more respect. That day, you learn to shape stone. The process is slower than you imagined. You sit beside a quiet man, whose knuckles are thick and dark with old bruises, and he places a block of flint in your palm with the reverence of someone handing you fire. He doesn't speak. He lifts his own block and strikes it carefully with a smaller stone, hard enough to break, soft enough to shape. The flint flakes in elegant curls, and you watch as he collects each one. None are wasted. Some become blades, others scrapers, still others tips for hunting garts. Each flake has a purpose, if you know how to see it. You try it yourself. The first strike is wrong, too hard. The stone fractures awkwardly, leaving a jagged edge. You wince, but he doesn't flinch. He just tilts the stone in your hand a little and gestures for you to try again. The second time is better. The third is worse. The fourth gives you a usable shard, sharp enough to draw a line down your thumb when you test it. You don't drop it. You just nod, and he nods back. It takes hours, but you begin to recognize the logic. Certain angles yield cleaner breaks. Certain stones have a feel to them, an internal rhythm you can't describe, but begin to sense. You wonder how many generations it took to learn this, how many failures were buried beneath the snow before someone figured out how to make a knife out of rock. And not just any knife, a perfect one. One that lasts. One that turns meat into pieces, hides into shelter, wood into weapons. Later, you're handed a curved tool you don't recognize. It's made of antler and polished bone, with 2 notches at the top. You're shown how to use it for scraping, held at a slant, dragged along a wet hide to separate fat and membrane. You try, awkwardly at first, until your wrist finds the rhythm. Back and forth. Pull, press, flick. The smell is strong, a mix of oil and damp fur, but you stop noticing after a while. The motion becomes everything. You watch as the hide begins to change, less wet, more pliable. A texture like thick skin, but cleaner, usable. By the end of the day, your hands are sore, your arms ache. But you've scraped 3 hides clean, and 2 of them are good enough to keep. That's confirmed by one of the others folding them into a storage bundle without complaint. Nothing here is praised out loud, but silence can be its own form of approval. As night falls, someone passes you a tool, unlike anything you've seen before. A narrow shaft of wood, shaped to fit the hand, with a carved hook at the end. They call it an artlatl. You don't know the word, but you understand the motion when they demonstrate it. A spear, launched not by the hand alone, but with leverage. The atlatl adds speed, distance, power. You watch as one of the hunters throws a dart clean across the camp and into a post with a solid thunk. It looks effortless. It is not. You practice the next day. Your first throw lands nose first in the snow. The second misses the post entirely and catches a tree with the side of the shaft. Laughter from the children. Not cruel, just gleeful. You smile. Try again. Eventually, you hit the target. Not clean, but solid. The hunter who showed you nods, then sharpens your dart without a word. You realize that what they've handed you isn't just a weapon. It's a multiplier. It turns your small strength into something much bigger. Even tasks that seem mundane, carving wood, shaping bone, weaving cord, reveal layers of complexity. Everything has a better way to be done. A way that saves time, that reduces effort, that makes the object last longer in cold and snow. The Cro-Magnons aren't just making tools to survive. They're making them with intention, with memory, with improvement. Each generation takes what the last built and sharpens it. You watch a woman carve a fishhook from bone. Her hands move with practiced ease, her eyes half-lidded, as if she's dreaming the shape into being. It's not large. It's not flashy, but you know it will catch food. You can see that certainty in the way she tests the point against her thumb, nods once, and sets it aside like another part of the world that now makes sense. Later that night, you sit beside the fire with a bowl of stew cradled in your hands. A mix of root, meat, and bone marrow thick enough to coat your tongue. The spoon you're given is wood, carved with the same care as everything else. It fits your grip perfectly. You eat slowly, each bite a lesson in how tools aren't just about survival. They're about dignity, about comfort, about feeling human in a world that constantly threatens to make you less. You think back to the early days, days when you clawed at frozen roots and chewed strips of frozen leather like a desperate animal. That version of you wouldn't know what to do with this spoon, with this fire, with this camp, with this place in the circle. But here you are now, scraping hides, shaping blades, sharpening darts, eating from a carved bowl like you belong. And you do. Because tools don't just change the world around you. They change the way people see you, the way you see yourself. They mark the line between helplessness and contribution. As the fire dims and the wind returns, you tuck your tools beside your sleeping spot like talismans, not to show off, but because they matter, because you made them, because tomorrow you'll use them again. And eventually, someone will notice how your knife cuts clean, how your dart flies straight, how your hands work without instruction. And when the firelight flickers low and the sound of soft humming begins again, you realize something else, something quieter but no less important. These people don't just teach you how to survive. They show you how to pass something on. It's in the evenings, after the labor has quieted and the air grows heavy with rest, that the real teaching begins. Not the sharp, hand-to-hand kind that comes with flint and sinew, but the long, slow kind that lives in the firelight. That stretches across generations and settles between breaths. It's not marked by lessons. No one stands up and declares a topic. No one asks questions. Instead, the stories unfold like they're already in the air, waiting to be pulled down and shaped. You sit near the edge of the circle, legs tucked beneath you, shoulders wrapped in hide. Your hands are still stained from smoke and bone dust. Your palms sore from scraping hide and tightening cord. But you don't notice the ache anymore. It lives beside you now, familiar and unthreatening. The fire cracks softly, and an elder begins to speak. His voice isn't raised. It's low and rhythmic, like footsteps through snow. His words roll in a language you still don't fully know, but the cadence makes you understand anyway. He gestures sometimes, wide arcs for mountains, curled fingers for rivers, a slow clap of palms for falling trees. The firelight dances across his knuckles and makes the shadows tell part of the story too. Others join in, not to interrupt, but to echo. A word here, a sound there, sometimes laughter, sometimes a hush. One woman hums softly when the elder mentions a journey. A child mimics the hand gesture for stars. You watch as the story becomes something passed between them like a shared bowl, each adding a drop, a movement, a memory. It's not about accuracy. It's about holding shape, about remembering what needs to be remembered. You begin to catch details. The stories repeat in cycles, with slight variations. One night the hunter crosses a river, another night it's a glacier. Sometimes the mammoth is killed, sometimes it escapes. The bones of the tale stay the same, but the meat changes depending on who's telling it and what kind of day it was. This is how they keep the world alive, not through permanence, but through pattern. Someone hands you a piece of bark and a bit of ochre. No words, just the offer. You take it, and without knowing why, begin to draw. A line first, then a curved back, then 4 legs. It's crude, a deer, maybe, or something close. But it doesn't matter. The child beside you watches, wide-eyed, and nods when you show it. Not because it's good, because it's yours. Because you added something to the circle. Later, one of the women pulls out a small pouch made from stitched fur and bone toggles. From it, she removes a set of carved tokens, flat pieces of antler marked with symbols. She lays them on a flat hide in front of the fire, placing each one carefully. A group leans forward slightly, and the mood shifts, not solemn, not tense, just focused. You realize this is more than a game. It's something closer to memory work, something between language and ritual. The tokens are moved, turned, flipped. People murmur. A man touches one with a fingertip, and raises his brow. A boy laughs. Someone claps softly. You can't follow the rules, but you can follow the shape of it. These pieces mean something. They trigger associations, stories, perhaps even decisions. You begin to notice that many of the stories told at night are about mistakes. Not failures exactly, but near misses. Times when someone chose wrong, or misread the wind, or forgot to honor a river before crossing. The point isn't shame. It's preservation. They're reminders, warnings wrapped in entertainment. You think back to your own near misses, the frozen nights, the spoiled meat, the hallucinations that whispered at the edge of your thoughts, and realize that if you were to share your own tale, it would fit in this circle. It would be welcomed, even if no one understood every word. One evening, while the others prepare for sleep, one of the hunters sits beside you with a hollowed-out bone in hand. He taps it against a stone in a slow rhythm, then uses a stick to scrape along its grooves. The sound is rough, dry, but strangely comforting. He continues for a while, adding a few whistles, low and breathy. You realize it's not music for performance. It's a story in sound. The rhythm is familiar. He pauses now and then and gestures to you, inviting you to mimic it. You try, badly at first, but you keep trying. He chuckles once, then shows you again. Not as correction, just as invitation. You learn how different rhythms mean different things. A steady tap might be travel. A staggered beat might mimic a hunt. A rising note might mark a surprise. A low one, a loss. There's no key for this language. It has to be absorbed, not decoded. You play a few notes of your own, guessing, and one of the children nods vigorously, pointing at the sky. Apparently, you played stars. You take that as a win. Some nights are quieter. There's no story, no chant, just shared stillness. Someone might hum. Someone else might carve. A fire crackles. The wind slips through branches. And in that quiet, you begin to understand that not every lesson is spoken. Some are felt. Some are given by being allowed to sit close and listen, by being trusted with silence. You watch how the children absorb everything. They aren't taught so much as included. Given smaller versions of tools, invited to copy movements, handed pieces of tasks they can manage. One child is shown how to strike flint. She fails 5 times, maybe more. But no one stops her. When the spark finally lands, the others murmur approval without clapping or cheering. It's not a performance. It's a passage. You remember how long it took you to make your first flame. Alone, in fear. And how different that would have felt if someone had been there beside you. Even the elders are still learning. You see one fumble with a knot and accept quiet help from a younger man. The exchange is wordless, respectful, ordinary. This culture doesn't divide people into teachers and students. It weaves them all into a process of remembering and refining. You begin to feel the pull of that weave. You're not just learning skills. You're absorbing a way of being, of staying soft while becoming strong, of holding space for memory and movement at once. You add your own rituals, small at first. You hum before you sleep, the way the others do. You carry your tools in a specific order: knife, scraper, flint, cord, tucked into a pouch of hide you stitched yourself. You begin to shape your own versions of the stories, testing gestures and rhythms, watching for recognition. And sometimes, someone smiles when you get close. The cold hasn't left. The danger hasn't disappeared. But here, in the firelight, with your fingers wrapped around tools you made and songs you now recognize, you realize something you hadn't dared to believe in weeks. You're no longer surviving on borrowed time. You're beginning to belong. It comes slowly, without announcement. You wake one morning, stretch your arms toward the smoke-streaked sky, and realize there's no urgency in your chest, no clutch of hunger, no ache of suspicion. The cold still presses against your skin, but it doesn't seep into your bones the way it once did. You're used to it now, Or maybe it's used to you. And for the first time since your journey began, your body doesn't feel like it's somewhere it doesn't belong. It just feels like yours. A piece of something whole. The camp is quiet, but not in that tense, breath-held way you once knew. It's a working quiet. Familiar, practiced, warm. Someone passes you with a bundle of sticks. Another offers you a strip of dried root with a knowing glance. It's bitter, yes, but it clears the throat and keeps the hunger flat. You chew without hesitation. These aren't gestures of charity anymore. They're habits, reflexes. You're woven into the daily rhythm now, not placed into it. That's the difference. You build a new shelter with two others, a mother and her brother. You're shown how to weave long grasses into a lattice that will support snow without collapsing, how to knot fir cords so they flex without snapping, how to choose a position that angles away from the wind. You're no longer just copying, you're problem solving, suggesting. Your voice joins the conversation, brief and quiet, but heard. When the shelter is finished, you're invited to sleep there, not as a guest, but as one of its builders. That night, you place your tools beneath your bedroll in a specific order, not out of necessity, but out of comfort. Flint, blade, scraper, cord, each piece familiar, worn by your hands, each one tied to a memory. You adjust the fur over the entrance, not because you were told to, but because you noticed a draft. And when someone lights a new fire at the center of camp, and you're asked to tend it while the others rest, you don't hesitate. You sit beside the flickering light and feed it in careful rhythm. It isn't a chore. It feels like trust. You begin to recognize the people by their footfalls, the way one elder always clears his throat before standing, the soft whistle a child makes when thinking, the faint hum another mutters while grinding roots. These are not strangers anymore. They are the sounds of your landscape. You wake to them, sleep to them, dream around them. They anchor you. You start calling things ours, without thinking, our fire, our hunt, our shelter. It slips out one morning when you hand someone your carved bone spoon. You say it's ours. They smile and hand it back. The small daily gestures become rituals. You lace your boots the same way each time. You place 3 stones in a row beside your bedding to weigh down the edge of the fur. It's something you saw the others do, and now it feels wrong not to. You hum while you work. Sometimes the tune is yours, sometimes it's borrowed. Either way, someone always joins in, even if it's just with a foot tapping or a quiet breath. The harmony isn't musical, it's social, a shared pulse that runs beneath everything. The camp doesn't mark time with calendars or carved symbols, but you start to feel the days. Not count them, but carry them. The snowfall is lighter now, and the trees drip with melt in the warmer hours. The animals return in slow clusters, sightings of tracks, then glimpses of fur. A hunt is planned. You're asked to join, not to watch, to throw. Your dart doesn't strike true, but it flies farther than ever. When you retrieve it, there's no judgment. Just a nod from the hunter beside you, and a quiet exchange of tools, yours for his. You hold it like an offering, like a conversation. You begin to speak more. Words come slowly, cautiously, but with purpose. A few of theirs, a few of your own. Names for things, bone, fire, snow, meat. Names for people. You ask someone what to call the tool you made, and she repeats a word twice, softly, until you can say it too. You try it again, and she laughs, not at you, but with delight. You repeat it several more times throughout the day, weaving it into your breath like a song you've just learned. By nightfall, you're using it naturally. You realize the camp has changed shape. New branches have been added to the shelters. A fresh ridge of snow has been carved into a windbreak. Bones from older meals are gone, ground down into tools, sharpened into needles, traded out for new ones. The fire pit is deeper now, surrounded by smooth stones darkened with soot. You didn't notice these changes as they happened. But now, looking around, it feels like the camp has grown with you in it, as if it always had a place waiting. There's a moment, quiet and fleeting, that stays with you. You're sitting near the fire, working a strip of leather into cord, when one of the children bumps into you. He doesn't apologize. He just adjusts and keeps playing. It's such a small thing, but it's the kind of thing that only happens when someone is unafraid, when your presence is normal, expected, trusted. You smile without realizing, and the woman across the fire sees it. She nods once, like she knows exactly what it means. You sleep deeply now, not because you're free from fear, but because you know you'll wake to faces you recognize, because the fire will still be lit, because someone will always be tending it. You curl under the furs, tools nearby, and drift off to the steady breathing of others around you. You've come a long way from the edge of that forest, from the brittle hunger and empty silence. This is more than survival now. This is the shape of belonging. But one evening, a traveler arrives. He walks with a limp, wrapped in heavy fur, his face weathered and wide. His speech is slower, his gestures unfamiliar, his voice deeper than the others. The camp welcomes him carefully, with gifts of food and a place by the fire. But there's a tension in the air, subtle, alert. You notice the way the hunters glance at one another, the way the elder asks questions with his eyes. The visitor doesn't stay long, 2 nights, maybe 3. Then he moves on. Still, something about him lingers in the camp. The shape of his face, the slope of his brow, the way he carried his tools, different, heavier, older. You begin to wonder, not in fear, in curiosity. There are others out there, people who look familiar, but aren't. People whose bones speak a different language. People who once moved through the same forests, hunted the same herds, slept beneath the same stars, and vanished. Or merged. You watch the fire burn low and feel a strange pull in your chest, not toward danger, but toward memory that doesn't belong to you. Toward a mystery that feels closer now than ever. Somewhere in the woods beyond this camp, in caves and hollows and silence, the last shadows of the Neanderthals still flicker, and they might be watching back. You don't set out that morning looking for anyone. The hunt was delayed by frost and shifting winds, and the rest of the group is occupied with sharpening tools and checking trap lines. You take the opportunity to walk, nothing urgent, just your usual path through the woods beyond the camp's edge. Your breath moves steadily, puffing pale ribbons into the brittle morning air, and your feet crunch against the hard crust of snow. Then, near the ridge that overlooks the frozen creek, you notice the tracks. They're not the prints of the usual forest wanderers, not the delicate skips of hares or the zigzag of foxes. These are heavy, deliberate, almost cautious. The feet are broad, the toes angled slightly inward, the gait shorter than any of your companions. You crouch down and place your hand beside one of the prints, studying the depth, the spread, the melt at the edges. Whoever passed this way did so only hours ago, maybe less. And they weren't running. They were walking slowly, with intent. The direction leads away from your camp, not toward another trail, not toward shelter, just deeper into the trees. You follow without speaking a word, not even to yourself. The silence feels too complete to interrupt. These woods are different, thicker, older, with long arms of lichen dangling from black-needled branches. The ground dips and rises, a slow rhythm of frost-heaved soil and moss-covered boulders. You step carefully, not from fear, but from instinct, each footfall placed with the kind of quiet attention that used to belong only to prey. You no longer walk like prey. That part of you has changed. At the edge of a clearing, beside a narrow steam fissure, where warm earth exhales mist into the cold, you see someone. They're crouched low near a rock formation, broad-shouldered, thick-limbed, wrapped in furs that blend with the undergrowth. Their skin is darkened with exposure, their hair long and coarse, and their brow is shaped differently from any you've seen before. Sloped, heavy, casting shadows over eyes that meet yours with neither alarm nor welcome. Just recognition. The air between you stills. Your hand remains at your side. You know better than to reach for a tool. Neither of you moves at first. The encounter is delicate, suspended in that brief balance where curiosity and survival measure each other. The figure rises slightly, revealing more of their form, shorter than you, but thick through the chest and limbs, powerful in a way that feels ancient. You don't see fear in their expression. You see judgment, calculation, the same weighing you've learned to perform when spotting a stranger near your own fire. This isn't a creature of the past. This is someone alive, here, now, choosing what to do about you. They make the decision before you do. From their belt, they pull a small object, a flint scraper, you think, expertly shaped, and place it on a flat stone near the stream. Then they step back, slowly, without turning, and crouch again, hands resting on their knees. The gesture is not submission. It's not exactly an offering either. It's something quieter, more neutral. A kind of presentation. A statement of presence. You understand immediately. They're showing you who they are by what they've made. You don't approach quickly. Every step is considered. When you reach the stone, you kneel beside it and study the tool. The craftsmanship is unmistakable. The flake scars are controlled, the edge retouched with care. This is not the product of luck. It's the result of long understanding, passed between hands that knew exactly how stone behaves. You don't pick it up. Instead, you place your own hand in the snow beside it, palm down, fingers spread wide, not to match theirs, just to show that you, too, have left a mark. When you lift your eyes, the figure is already gone. No sound, no farewell. Only broken branches and fading tracks where they once stood. You stay beside the stone a while longer. The forest around you breathes. The mist continues to rise from the warm seam in the earth, curling past your knees and into the trees. You take the scraper in both hands, not as a trophy, not as a relic, but as a question, and tuck it carefully into the pouch beside your own tools. It doesn't feel like theft. It feels like permission. Back at camp, you don't speak of the encounter. You return before dark, bring firewood, share in the cooking. You sit beside the others and eat in silence. But the weight of that tool in your pouch never quite leaves your thoughts. In the days that follow, you find yourself watching the others more closely. The way one elder carries his shoulders, the way a child's brow furrows when they concentrate, the way one of the hunters grips his spear with both hands when aiming. You begin to see traces, not proof, not answers, just possibilities. That night, beside the fire, you take the Neanderthal scraper from your pouch and compare it to the ones your group makes. The differences are subtle. Yours is longer, thinner, made with a slightly different motion. But the purpose is the same. The understanding behind them, the knowledge of force and fracture, is shared. You wonder how many lifetimes it took to get here. How many ancestors shaped stones by trial and blood, and whether those ancestors came only from your line or from others too, now silent in the woods. You begin to dream differently, not just of fire and teeth and storms, but of faces you don't know, voices without words, paths through the forest that lead to camps built from materials you've never used. In your dreams, those people don't vanish. They linger. They hand you tools. They point to the stars. They sit beside your fire, not speaking, just warming their hands. There's no certainty in any of it. But one morning, while scraping hide beside one of the younger members of your group, you show them the Neanderthal scraper. They study it without question, then hand it back. A moment later, they mimic its shape on the hide you're preparing, dragging their tool at a different angle, trying to recreate its edge. You don't stop them. You just watch. What remains of the Neanderthals may not be bones or stories. It may be in the way a child tests a new grip, in the shape of a blade that cuts better than expected, in the instinct to step silently through snow, to weigh a stranger without fear, to place something valuable on a stone and wait. And somewhere in the trees beyond your camp, there are likely others still watching, others still shaping, still surviving. In the days after that first meeting, you begin to notice the forest differently. It doesn't change, exactly. It's still the same thickets and frosted ridges, the same cracked trees and half-buried animal paths, but your eyes begin to catch things they never did before. A twist of sinew tied around a tree root. A cluster of stones laid too deliberately to be natural. A spiral etched into the inside of a boulder, only visible when the light hits it at a certain angle. The signs are subtle, quiet, easy to miss if you weren't already looking for them. But once you've seen one, the others start to appear like embers in ash, not bright, but persistent. The Neanderthals don't build in ways you're used to. There are no clear camps, no fires visible from ridgelines, no chatter or smoke. Their presence hides in the land itself, layered into the roots and shadows, protected by silence and time. You begin to understand that survival isn't only about endurance, it's about concealment, about knowing how to be invisible until you decide to be seen. And these people, whoever they still are, have turned invisibility into an art. One afternoon, during a hunt that leads you beyond your usual range, you stumble across what at first seems like an animal den. A hollow beneath a wind-thrown pine, just big enough to crawl into. You crouch low, peering inside. The interior is dry, insulated with pine needles and lined with long grass. Near the back wall, you spot bones, small ones, arranged in a line. Not scattered by a kill. Arranged, a pattern. Nearby, tucked beneath a slab of bark, is a hammerstone, smooth and dark and shaped by hands. You pick it up carefully. It's heavy in your palm, worn from use, stained with something old. This wasn't left behind casually. It was placed, maybe forgotten, maybe left behind on purpose. You don't take it. You set it back exactly as you found it, brushing a bit of loose bark over the stone again. As you rise, the hairs on the back of your neck lift. You're being watched. Not in fear, in awareness. You don't turn around. Instead, you step away slowly, your posture open, your hands relaxed. A silent thank you. A promise not to disturb. The forest stays quiet behind you. Later, when you tell a single elder in your group, just one, a man who's shaped more tools than you'll ever hold, he nods slowly. Not with surprise, but with recognition. He doesn't say much, only gestures toward your pouch and mimes placing something gently on the ground. It's his way of telling you he understands, and that he's been there too. You begin to notice how often their techniques echo through your own. The angle of a scraper, the twist of a binding cord, the use of red ochre, not just for color, but as a sealant, as an offering. There are moments when a Cro-Magnon elder demonstrates something you've seen already in the shadows. And when it works, when it holds better or cuts faster, you feel the weight of those unknown hands behind your own. The Neanderthals may not speak with you, but they've already spoken through your tools. You think about fire often, not just the one in camp with its warmth and light, but the idea of fire in the bones. The kind that pushes you to make something out of nothing, to crack flint until it becomes sharp enough to feed your family, to carry embers through snowstorms wrapped in bark and moss. You begin to understand that fire isn't just a tool, it's a signature. It leaves behind more than ash. It marks time, it marks presence, and it marks change. Some say the Neanderthals never learned to make fire, that they relied on stealing it, preserving it, borrowing it from storms. But you don't believe that anymore? You've seen too many signs, Too many scorched stones in places where no one else has walked. Too many blackened hearths tucked deep inside caves that no one in your camp ever mentioned. Maybe their fire didn't rise as high. Maybe they didn't gather around it in song. But it was there. You feel it in the ground, in the bones. One evening, you're sharpening a bone awl beside the camp's main fire when a flake of stone falls into the coals. It sparks briefly, and something about the smell, the flash of old stone against fresh flame, reminds you of that first tool, the one placed on the stone for you to find. You retrieve it from your pouch, run your thumb along its edge again. It's dulled slightly, but the shape is perfect. You use it now when you need quiet work, things done slowly. It's not for everyday use. It's for memory. As the others settle into sleep, you stay up a little longer, adding sticks to the fire, watching the sparks drift upward. You begin to wonder what their stories were. Not just the ones they might have told aloud, but the ones they built into bone, into soil, into the still air of winter shelters. What did they whisper to their children on nights like this? What did they believe about the wind? About stars? About strangers? You'll never know. But the questions have roots now, and they've taken hold. You realize the Neanderthals didn't vanish because they failed. That's too simple. They were clever, resourceful, skilled. You've seen it with your own hands. If they disappeared, it wasn't because they were weaker. It may have been something far more complex. Something about numbers, or change, or timing. Or maybe they didn't disappear at all. Maybe they became part of the fire you sit beside now. Maybe they were folded into the rhythm of your people. One winter at a time, one tool at a time, one story at a time. You lie down beside the embers, your thoughts circling that hollow beneath the pine, that crouched figure by the stream. Their silence feels less like absence now, and more like choice. You've learned to recognize quiet as a kind of wisdom. And you've learned that some legacies don't shout. They endure. By morning, the snow has covered your tracks from yesterday. But something lingers in the air, an awareness, a connection that isn't built from words. You join the group preparing for the next day's trek, but your eyes scan the trees differently now. You're not just looking for game. You're watching for the echoes of other paths. You're listening for footsteps shaped like yours, but older, heavier, walking beside you through time, whether you see them or not. You've been walking this valley for weeks now, watching how the world reshapes itself as the ice begins to loosen its grip. Beneath your feet, the snow is still stubborn in the shade, but here and there, it gives way to patches of brown, damp soil. The edges of your campfire smoke cling less heavily to your skin, and some birds have returned, their calls thin and sharp, like flint strikes against the silence. Everything smells like thaw, wet bark, old leaves, and the faint promise of something green. And in the rhythm of this changing world, the question that's been circling your thoughts begins to rise with more urgency. What really happened between your people and the Neanderthals? It's a question you've never been taught to ask out loud. Around the fire, the elders speak of the old days in broad strokes. The time before you came to this valley, before your people learned the deeper trails or discovered the soft pockets of moss that hide spring water under stone. But when someone tells of a cave found long ago with bones not quite like yours, or tools shaped just a little differently, the conversation trails off into silence. No one says fear, but the silence is always the same. And it leaves you wondering if they were once here, and now they're not, then who has the right to tell that story? And why did we stop telling it? The signs are still around you. You've seen them in the woods, in the angle of a collapsed shelter covered in roots, in the dark soot smears along the ceilings of forgotten overhangs, in the strange little spirals carved into bone no one seems to claim. They're there in the tools tucked carefully beneath fallen pine logs, in the thick-walled hearth circles hidden under a foot of earth. You don't need to be a historian to know that someone lived here before you. Someone strong, quiet, clever. Someone who didn't just vanish because the weather shifted. You've seen their work. It was never clumsy. Sometimes, when you sit sharpening your blades or stitching sinew into a new pair of hide boots, you find your fingers repeating movements you've never consciously learned. A double wrap on a binding cord. A twist of leather softened over steam and pressed into shape without cracking. You don't know where those skills came from. Maybe someone showed them to you once. Or maybe they traveled across generations, passed from one set of hands to another, never written, never claimed, just remembered. It makes you wonder, if the Neanderthals truly disappeared, how did so much of what they knew find its way into what you do? You think of the first meeting, if there ever was one. What would it have looked like? Not some grand council in the open sun. Not a moment of peace with carved stone offerings and painted flags. It would have been something small. A pair of hunters following the same herd. Two figures glimpsed through frost-covered branches. A young child hearing footsteps and turning to see someone like them, but not. The resemblance would have been uncanny and strange. Similar enough to stir recognition, different enough to raise alarm. Would they have backed away? Offered food? Raised their weapons? What happened after those moments? Were there skirmishes? Maybe, though you doubt it was always like that. You've learned that in the deep cold, people rarely fight unless they're desperate. Conflict wastes energy. It wounds. It risks more than it gains. In the stories your elders whisper, when they're not guarding themselves, there are hints of exchanges. Tools traded. Game tracked in tandem. Even shelter shared, when the storms became too much for one group alone. There's a practicality in survival. It doesn't leave room for pride. Still, your people survived. The Neanderthals, at least in their pure form, did not. That's what the bones say, or at least what the layers suggest. But even that word, survived, feels too simple. It draws a line where none exists. Because when you look around the fire at night, you don't just see Cro-Magnon faces. You see shadows of heavy brows in certain elders. You see thick wrists and wide palms in the hunters, who never miss. You see habits in the quiet ones, the ones who sit slightly apart, who listen more than they speak, who move through the forest without leaving a single broken twig behind. These traits don't belong to just one people. They belong to something older, something shared. What if it wasn't a conquest? What if it was emerging? Some say the Neanderthals lacked language, that they never spoke in full sentences, never traded stories, never sang. But you don't believe that anymore. You've heard laughter echoing from caves where no footprints lead. You've seen markings carved not just for function, but for beauty. Lines shaped like rivers, circles within circles. Not maps, not messages, just meaning. There is more to expression than words. You've felt whole thoughts passed in a glance, in the way someone hands you a tool they know you'll need. You've felt language that requires no voice. The bones, though, they leave clues. Some show injuries that healed, signs that the wounded were cared for. Others show mixed features, skulls with broad brows and rounded craniums, jaws shaped from two histories. And the tools, those are the loudest voices of all, because once the blades were distinct, but over time they begin to blur. One group learned from the other, or maybe both changed together. Who's to say which hand shaped which stone first? You start to think of competition as a narrow idea, something imagined by those who've never had to keep a fire alive in a cave with only damp moss and wet pine cones. Out here, survival doesn't reward rivalry. It rewards cooperation, quiet copying, accidental sharing. The world is too cold for ego. Maybe the Neanderthals didn't lose. Maybe they just gave in. Maybe they gave what they knew, slowly, one fire at a time, until the difference didn't matter anymore. Maybe they stayed, Not in name, not in tribe, but in breath and scar and memory. You've seen the way people carry things without realizing it. A habit, a stance, a lullaby passed down without a source. You don't need to be remembered by name to survive. Historians might argue about extinction for centuries. They'll ask whether your kind outcompeted the Neanderthals, or whether climate was the real killer. They'll weigh theories like bones on a scale, but none of them will sit where you are now, by this fire, with that scraper in your hand, hearing the soft hush of wind move through the trees in a pattern that sounds an awful lot like breathing. If they had been truly separate, if Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon were opposites, then how did everything come to feel so blurred? You turn your eyes toward the forest again. It's darker tonight, though not from cloud cover. The stars shine just as clearly, but the trees seem thicker, the shadows deeper. And somewhere in that darkness, you feel the presence of another story, still waiting to be told. Not from a book, not from a dig, but from a memory stored in movement. In silence, in the press of one set of fingers into stone thousands of years ago. The fire crackles. Behind you, someone sings a low, tuneless hum to soothe a child. You don't recognize the melody. Maybe it's new. Maybe it's older than anyone here can remember. Tomorrow, the group moves again, farther west, into territory no one alive has mapped. There will be new caves, new carvings, new evidence buried in the freeze-thaw of long winters. As you roll up your tools and shoulder your satchel, you wonder whether the answers live there, or whether they've already been carried forward in your very bones, walking beside you without a name. Evening returns in its familiar rhythm, with the sun slipping behind the ridge and the sky burning itself out in slow bands of copper, ash, and violet. You've been walking most of the day, searching for signs, for food, for stories hidden in the dirt, and now the bones in your legs ache with the kind of quiet tiredness that doesn't ask for conversation. You sit by the fire, boots off, your hands cupped loosely around a bowl of cooked root mash that still steams in the cold. It's not much, but it fills the silence while your mind returns, as it always seems to the ones who came before. You've grown used to reading bones. Even before your first hunt, even before your fingers could confidently wrap a spear shaft, you were taught to see the language etched in femurs and teeth, in sockets and cracks. Bones don't lie, not the way stories sometimes do. They bend, they break, they wear down in patterns that speak louder than words. This one walked far. That one healed after a terrible wound. These teeth show famine. That skull shows age, and maybe reverence. But in between the known facts, the questions multiply. And tonight, as the smoke rises in long strands into the crisp air, you think about how many of those questions will never be fully answered. There are theories, of course. The fire circle always has one or two older voices willing to share them, especially on quiet nights like this, when the sky is clear and the air is too cold for sleep to come easily. One says the Neanderthals died off because they couldn't adapt to the cold fast enough. You look at that speaker's cracked hands, at their own frostbitten toes wrapped in fur, and wonder how anyone ever truly adapts to ice that moves through bone. Others blame tools, that your ancestors had better ones, quicker ones, finer points, and more clever handles. But you've held both. You've seen the flint work they left behind. That wasn't a people who lacked skill. Still others mutter of sickness, plagues carried without warning, invisible enemies that spread faster than fire through dry grass. Maybe there were illnesses that Cro-Magnon groups could resist, but Neanderthals couldn't. It's possible. The bones show stress sometimes. Malnourishment, sudden die-offs. But you've also seen clusters of remains with signs of care. Limbs set back into place, toothless elders who lived long enough to need help feeding. That kind of compassion doesn't flourish among the doomed. It belongs to people who survive. Another theory floats between embers some nights, quieter and less comfortable, that there was violence. that your ancestors pushed them out, starved them of hunting grounds, drove them from shelter to shelter until winter finished the job. The people who speak this version rarely do so with pride. They speak it as a possibility that feels both too dark and too plausible. You've seen the look in their eyes when they say it. Not triumph, but guilt they don't know the shape of. Like something buried in the family silence. A kind of inherited ache. And yet, the theory you return to most often isn't one that comes with blame or maps or conquest. It's the one you carry when you're alone, walking through deep woods or standing in the strange hush of a cave you know no one's entered in generations. It's the one that doesn't try to explain away their disappearance, but instead asks why we insist they disappeared at all. You remember the scraper, left like a message. The way your fingers learn shapes they were never taught. The way some children in your group hum melodies no one claims to have invented. There are more ways to survive than by keeping a name. It's tempting to believe in sharp lines. Cro-Magnon here, Neanderthal there, a clean break between them. But bones tell a Messier truth. Some skulls refuse classification. Some burial sites mix styles and habits. Some weapons combine traits no single tradition can fully own. Even the fire pits blur together. Layers of ash from different groups, shaped with different stones, but built in the same places, used the same way. You begin to understand that history isn't laid down in single voices. It settles like snow, drifted, scattered, and packed down until no one remembers where one flake ended and the next began. You wonder, not for the first time, how many of your clan's own stories were borrowed without knowing. Not stolen, just absorbed. Repeated until the source was lost. Maybe it's in the way one elder paints symbols in ochre on the cave wall, spirals, and lines he swears are from a dream. Maybe it's in the dance the children do around the fire, copying movements older than their grandparents. Maybe it's in the quiet customs you follow without question, leaving stones at crossroads, avoiding certain trees, never whistling after dark. The theories drift through the camp like smoke. Some are held onto tightly, clung to like the shape of a spear you trust not to break. Others dissolve in the cold before anyone finishes speaking. They come from bone fragments, yes, but also from stories, fears, longings, and guesses that fill in the spaces between what can be measured. And as you listen to them, you realize something else. That the desire to understand is itself a kind of inheritance. A shared trait. A mirror held to the past. Eventually, the fire burns lower, and those still awake huddle in their cloaks, drawing patterns in the dirt or staring into the coals. You sit quietly, watching the last curls of smoke wing their way into the stars. Somewhere in the forest beyond, another fire may have once burned, lower, smaller, unseen. Or maybe it still does. The Neanderthals may be gone from the earth, but they are not gone from you. Not entirely. You carry them in your hands, in your caution, in your wonder. You feel it most of all when you sleep. In dreams that walk down unfamiliar paths. In faces that don't belong to your clan, but feel familiar all the same. Sometimes they speak. Sometimes they simply watch. But they are always there. Silent presences in the fog of your mind. Not demanding answers, only waiting to be remembered. As dawn begins to stain the eastern sky with light, you close your eyes for a few more minutes of rest. A few more breaths beside the coals. Today will be another day of movement, of searching, of building a world with old bones beneath your feet. And as you begin to stir, your thoughts turn gently toward the ones who never had to scavenge or sleep alone. The ones who were born into the warm center of the fire circle, not at its edges. The journey from shadow to comfort is worth tracing too. And the warmth of those inner rings, the laughter, the songs, the invisible walls of status and safety, those deserve a closer look now. It happens in a way that leaves no warning. One moment, the man is there, walking just a few steps ahead of you through the pine-laced slope that curves beside the stream. He isn't speaking, but he hums a little under his breath, low and absent-minded, a familiar sound you don't notice until it stops. His arms are full of kindling, and the strap of a leather satchel bites slightly into his shoulder. Then his foot catches on something unseen. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's no catch at all. Maybe there's just a strange stillness, his leg pausing mid-step, his balance lost in some invisible way. He pitches forward and folds into the earth with a softness that's wrong. People don't fall like that when they're conscious. At first, everyone freezes. You half expect him to groan, to laugh, to sit up and swat away the snow clinging to his hair. But he doesn't move. You rush forward with the others, kneeling beside him, hands unsure of where to touch. His chest rises once, shallow and stuttering, then not again. His mouth is slightly open, as if he meant to speak and didn't get the chance. There is no blood, no twisted limb, no sign of breath caught mid-laugh or heart seized in sudden panic. Just absence. A strong man whose pulse has simply vanished. The elder woman kneels beside him, eyes unreadable. She places her palm gently over his ribs, then presses her knuckles beneath his jaw. The rest of you wait, as if breath can be coaxed back by patience alone. But the woman only exhales, quietly. She smooths his eyelids shut with the backs of her fingers, and then draws back, kneeling in silence with her hands resting on her thighs. No one weeps, not yet. You don't know what to feel. You hardly knew him. But that didn't matter until now. He was one of the unshaken parts of the group, the ones you didn't worry about. He walked heavy. He carried twice his share without ever being asked. He was the kind of person who gave the group a sense of sturdiness, like one of the old stone cairns left at the edge of a hunting trail. A quiet signpost that the path was still steady. Now he's gone. There are no words for deaths like this. He wasn't old. He wasn't injured. He wasn't sick. He simply isn't anymore. You help with the burial the next morning. The ground is stiff, but not yet frozen, and the diggers work in silence while the rest gather firewood for the rites. He is wrapped in his cloak, the one smeared with berry dye that the children used to laugh at. They place his tools beside him, his flint knife, a pouch of softened hide cords, the last set of bones he carved into dice. One of the children who watched from the edge now steps forward and places a pinnacone in his hands, as if trying to offer him one last small thing to hold. No one lights a second fire that night. There's only the central flame, burning low and steady, casting long shadows against the rock. People eat quickly and without joy, their backs hunched, their eyes locked on the glowing logs, as if the answers might flicker in the embers. No one says what you're all thinking. If death can come without warning, then no one is safe. The fire ring feels smaller now, not in size, but in spirit. Every gap is noticed. Every face is measured. You find yourself counting heads, checking who's nearby, who's gone off to relieve themselves, who hasn't spoken in too long. A kind of silent audit begins to take shape in everyone's mind, as if vigilance could protect you from the next unexplained loss. You begin to notice how some people shift closer to the heat. Not obviously, not greedily, but steadily. The eldest sits slightly more centered now. Those with injuries are quietly allowed to sleep nearer the flames. The younger ones curl into each other for warmth, but aren't offered more furs. The group has begun to draw invisible lines instinctively, as if the center might offer more than heat, as if it might offer safety, as if placement near the fire can hold off fate. That's when you begin to see the pattern. It's not just about grief, it's about place. The man who died had always sat near the edge, not at the fringe, not an outsider, but not central either. He didn't speak during planning discussions. He didn't eat first. He wasn't the kind of man people watched for decisions. Reliable, yes. Respected, perhaps. But never essential. His death was a crack in the circle, but not at its core. And now that space stays empty. You pay more attention after that. You watch who eats first, who finishes their meat slowly, knowing there's no rush, who gets handed the water skin without needing to ask. You watch whose voice cuts through the evening hush with authority, and who chooses silence, whether by caution or habit. You study how the others react when someone laughs or sings off-key, if they smile indulgently, or glance toward the center to see how that behavior is judged. This is where you begin to understand that survival is not just about knowing the land or killing the right prey. It's also about position. It's about who is included and who is tolerated, about how warmth is rationed, not in food or firewood, but in presence. You think of the man again. His name doesn't echo in the camp the way others do. His absence is noted, but not marked with ritual or remembrance. A day passes, then two. His space in the sleeping row becomes someone else's without discussion. His tools are not passed down, not burned, not claimed. They are simply left, as if no one wants to invite whatever stilled his heart into their own hands. And yet, you remember him clearly now. How he shared dried mushrooms with you once, when your stomach growled too loudly. How he once built a windbreak on a cold night without being asked. He had hands that worked without fanfare, and a voice that rose only to warn, not to boast. He wasn't loud. He wasn't central. But he was good. The quiet ones are often the first to vanish unnoticed. Now, each night, as you pull your furs around your shoulders, you feel the difference in distance from the fire. You're close enough to feel the heat on your face, but not your legs. Others sleep with their backs warmed and faces cooled, perfectly placed in the golden glow. You wonder how many more steps it would take to reach that place. How many winters? How many kills? How much silence observed? And how many stories kept private? That warmth feels earned, or maybe inherited, maybe both. Still, you keep watching, not with jealousy, but with curiosity. You want to understand the pattern, because in this camp, status is never spoken. It's lived. It's reinforced by firelight, and whose laughter gets echoed. You settle back into your furs and close your eyes. Tomorrow, the group moves again. A better hunting region awaits, deeper in the hills. It's said there's a narrow valley there, where the fire burns hotter and the caves hold more than just shelter. A place where the highest in the clan live with warmth, food, and the kind of songs that never reach the edges of the fire ring. There's a cave near the ridge where the moss never quite dries. You find it while searching for dry kindling, your steps crunching through last season's frost-bitten leaves, your breath steady but visible in the morning chill. It's not a cave anyone pointed you toward. It's barely marked, really, just a crack in the rock face, masked by undergrowth, with roots like frozen veins crisscrossing the entrance. But something draws you in. Maybe it's the wind moving strangely through the trees. Maybe it's the way the birds go quiet when you step near. Inside, it's cold and damp, the stone slicked beneath your boots. You duck under a low ceiling of limestone and emerge into a pocket of space that feels hushed. Not empty, just patient. Along the back wall, just above eye level, you see the faded remnants of ochre. Lines, swirls. A shape that might be a sun, or a tree, or a shoulder. It's too warm to say for certain, but you know it wasn't made by your people. Or if it was, it's from far before the stories began to keep track of names. You don't touch the wall. You just sit for a while, listening to the drip of water from some slow fissure overhead. And as your eyes adjust, more shapes reveal themselves. Not clearly. Not like the art you've seen in sacred caves back home. These are simpler, rougher, almost shy. It feels like finding a memory that doesn't belong to you, but still fits in your hand. When you return to camp, your tongue holds the story, but your chest holds something else. A weight that isn't sorrow, more like recognition. Like something in that cave saw you and didn't flinch. That night, while the others gnaw on strips of dried meat and someone mends a broken bone hook with sinew, You ask the question without framing it as one. Has anyone ever seen a cave with paintings that don't match our ways? You describe the lines only loosely, enough to hint, but not to define. One of the older women glances up from her work. Her hands pause, still holding the hook and thread. There were people before, she says, voice low. Not like us, not entirely. But they knew the land, knew how to draw. Left their stories for trees to forget. A few others glance toward her, then toward you. No one says more. It's not a subject that draws discussion, only acknowledgement. You lie awake longer than usual that night, your furs pulled up to your chin, staring at the cave ceiling. The firelight flickers across the stone above, like water moving in reverse. You picture the hands that left those marks, shorter fingers, broader palms, thick with callus and frostbite. What stories did they carry? Did they name the stars? Did they know the same fears? Or did they survive in ways your people never imagined? There are stories never told to children, only whispered among adults when the fire grows low, that the old people didn't disappear, that they became something else, that when the clans grew and moved and mingled, the older ones didn't fight, didn't vanish. They folded in. They softened their names, gave up their own fire circles, learned new rhythms, new foods, new words. Some say they chose to blend in rather than die apart. Others say they had no choice. That extinction is just another word for absorption no one wanted to admit. But you've seen the signs. The man who grinds pigments with his fist instead of a stone. The child whose sleep-talking is full of syllables no one recognizes. The woman whose laugh carries a resonance that doesn't match her mother's or her clan's. None of this is proof. But none of it is coincidence either. Your people don't talk about bloodlines in exact terms. There are no scrolls, no lists, no carvings to trace ancestry back 100 generations. What exists is story, gesture, intuition. Who walks like whom? Who sings a tune no one remembers teaching? Who never gets lost in forests everyone else avoids? These things are noticed. And sometimes, someone, usually an elder, says quietly, "She's got the old blood," or "He's closer to before." It's not said cruelly. If anything, it sounds like respect, a kind of awe. You think about the Neanderthals as they've been described to you. Heavy bones, flat noses, deep chests built for colder air, but also capable hands, care for the weak, burials with flowers pressed into soil. You've seen the skeleton of a child with a crushed leg, healed. That doesn't happen by accident. It means someone carried him, fed him, kept him alive without asking what he could contribute. That kind of compassion outlives disappearance. Some nights, when you sleep near the edge of camp, dreams carry you further than your body ever could. You walk trails you've never seen, hear birds that don't match any in your region. You stand at the edge of a cliff and watch mammoths pass below, slow, deliberate, heavy with time. And beside you stands someone unfamiliar. Their face is indistinct, but their presence feels anchored. They don't speak. Just place a hand on your shoulder. And in the dream, it feels like remembering something you never learned. In waking hours, you watch. The smallest clues begin to matter more. A knot tied differently. A cooking technique no one else uses. A tune hummed under breath that stops when noticed. These aren't fragments of otherness. They're fingerprints pressed into the clay of your people. You don't know where they start, only that they're there. Some of the group clings to the idea of extinction, that the old people left, or died, or were overcome. It's easier, maybe. Easier to say, they're gone, than to admit they might be part of you, that your hands might carry their shape, that your voice might echo a song sung beside another fire, long ago. You sit near the embers, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. Around you, the clan begins to settle, bedding down, rolling cloaks over shoulders, murmuring their last words of the night. The fire pops quietly, a log shifting, and a few sparks drift upward, vanishing just beneath the stars. In that final hush before sleep, you think of absorption, not as conquest, but as inheritance, not taking over, just taking in. And as the sky deepens and your eyelids lower, a strange warmth settles in your chest, a sense that nothing ever truly vanishes. That stories change their skins, shift their shape, but always find a way to survive. Somewhere in the quiet bones of this world, those old people still breathe. In your customs, in your silences, in the ways you seek warmth. And not far from where you lie tonight, there are others, those born into the warmth of the fire's heart. Those who've never had to wonder what was lost, because everything they've known has always been within reach. Their lives run differently. And soon, you'll step into their circle. From the moment you arrive, it's clear this is a different kind of camp. The smoke doesn't smell desperate. The hides are thicker. The laughter is lighter. You've walked for days through slush and thin snowpack, following a trail worn flat by those who move with purpose, not fear. And when you reach the rise just before the hill drops into the valley basin, it all opens up before you. A full settlement, not just a resting place. Curved windbreaks ringed with woven reeds. A smokehouse positioned to catch the least wind. Shelters that don't lean or sag, but stand with the quiet confidence of things made to last. And in the center of it all, a fire. Not a mere pile of coals hastily lit against a frozen night, but a proper hearth, ringed with stone, dug into earth, shaped like something that's meant to stay. Its smoke rises in a slow, steady plume, not hurried, not ragged, as if even the fire here knows it's well fed and secure. You approach with a kind of hesitation, not from fear, exactly, but from the awareness that this is not your circle. This fire belongs to people born closer to it, people who don't have to earn their place beside it because their place has never been in question. And yet, as you're welcomed in, softly, politely, with the nods and glances that suggest you're permitted, but not central, you begin to see how different life can feel when you begin it with warmth. Children here don't flinch at loud sounds. They don't scan the treetops when a branch cracks in the distance. They sit on furs, hands full of carved toys or dried berries, and their conversations swirl like smoke, aimless, curious, free. No one is constantly looking over their shoulder or checking the firewood pile with a worried count. When food is distributed, it is intense. No hands hover near weapons while meat is passed around. There's trust here, and not the kind built slowly through trial and fire, but the kind baked into the very bones of the place. You realize something else too. These people don't just have more. They assume they will always have more. And that assumption makes them looser somehow, more casual in their steps, more relaxed in how they sit or speak. When one man drops a piece of flint and it chips, he only chuckles and brushes the fragments aside. You know others who would curse or pocket even the shards for some future desperate use. But not here. Here, nothing is precious because everything is expected. Even the way they move through the day feels different. There's no rush to hunt at dawn, no frenzied scraping of hides before the cold sets in. Tasks are completed steadily, yes, but with a kind of leisure. Some of them even nap in the middle of the afternoon, full bellies rising and falling beside a fire that no one guards with narrowed eyes. You watch all this from your place near the edge of the circle, your knees drawn up beneath your cloak. No one pushes you away. They feed you, let you warm your hands. But you're aware of the invisible rings inside this circle. There are those born to sit close to the flame, and those who are merely allowed to visit. What's surprising is how effortless the high-born make it look. It's not just about having more, better food, warmer furs, longer rest, but about having it all without ever seeming to question whether you deserve it. That confidence, inherited rather than earned, settles into their bones early. A child here doesn't just learn to speak. They learn to speak first. Their stories are told loudly, even when they don't yet make sense. The adults lean in, nod, smile. Encouragement ripples outward, and you start to see how power begins quietly around a fire, with someone being told their voice matters before they even know how to use it. You think back to your first winters, when warmth came second to silence, when your clan's fire was often no more than a few dry sticks, barely enough to thaw fingertips. There was little room for joy. Everything was useful, or it was discarded. No time for indulgence. Certainly no time for elaborate songs about stars or talking animals. Here, by contrast, you watch a man spend half an hour shaping a figurine from clay, adding ears and a long tail, clearly meant to be something between a deer and a dream. It's not for barter. It's not practical. It's just for the child sitting in front of him, who laughs when the tail breaks off and begs him to fix it again. This is what security looks like. It isn't just shelter, it's invention, imagination, a freedom to waste time, because time isn't something they're racing against. They aren't surviving the cold, they're living through it. But not everything is softness. You also notice how deeply the rules of this place are embedded. No one steps over certain lines in the snow. No one speaks when a particular elder raises her hand. When the fire dies too low, it is always the same person who stirs it back to life. There is order beneath the ease, and the children born into it know exactly where they belong. Perhaps more importantly, they know where others do not. Still, you learn. You mimic. You sit quietly and listen to the rhythms of this place, the way jokes begin, the timing of shared tasks, the pauses before laughter. You begin to feel it under your skin, how belonging here is not shouted or earned with single deeds. It's accumulated through presence, through repetition, through not making waves. One evening, as the snow falls gently and the firelight reflects off the pale animal hide stretched above the central shelter, you're invited to sit closer. Not at the center. Not yet. But a ring inward, where the warmth touches both cheeks instead of just one. A woman hands you a bowl of something sweet and hot, berries, honey, cooked tubers, and you accept it with quiet thanks, trying not to glance at the others to see if anyone disapproves. No one does, but no one cheers either. It's a test, not a reward. As the night deepens, stories begin. Not the kind meant for teaching, but the kind meant for reminding. Tales of ancestors who survived worse winters than this. Of beasts brought down by clever traps. Of clans that tried to challenge this one and were driven away like smoke in the wind. You hear pride in these stories, but also something more subtle, reinforcement. These are not just tales. They are affirmations. This fire has always been here. These people have always been strong. Their children will always rise above the frost. Of course, you know that's not entirely true. No one always survives. No fire always burns. But here, in this moment, wrapped in thick hides and heavy silence, it's easy to believe otherwise. You lean back against the post behind you and let the fire warm the soles of your feet. The smell of rendered fat and pine resin clings to your skin. The smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, and for once, you aren't calculating how long it will last. Not everyone needs to hunt to survive. Some are born into the warmth. But even within that warmth, something else simmers beneath the surface. Because when you have everything, the things you fear begin to change. You begin to fear boredom, dullness, losing your edge. And that's where the strange rituals begin to appear. The quiet tensions between ease and unease. You're about to see what status looks like when survival is no longer the main concern, when attention, honor, and subtle power take its place. There's a stone blade in your hand, sharp as any you've seen, but lighter, more balanced. The edge gleams faintly where it's been flaked just right. Not chipped by need, but shaped by choice. You turn it between your fingers, admiring how it fits your palm, like it was waiting there all along. Only you didn't make it. You didn't trade for it either. Someone simply handed it to you one morning after breakfast and said, without ceremony, use this one now, just like that, as if it were nothing, as if the hours of labor behind its smooth curve were invisible, irrelevant. And in this place, they are. Here, tools appear. Spears are ready before a hunt is announced. Skins are scraped and tanned without your hands ever touching the rawhide. Even the firewood seems to collect itself, neatly stacked, never damp, never short. You begin to understand. When you are born into the inner circle, effort is optional. The world arrives already shaped. That's not to say no one works. On the contrary, some people seem to do little else. But it's a curious kind of labor, quiet, invisible, done by those on the margins. You see them, of course, the ones who rise first and sleep last, who carry baskets, clean hides, refill water skins. But no one talks about them much. They don't sit by the central fire. Their laughter, if you hear it at all, stays low and doesn't carry. They work, so the rest don't have to think about what effort feels like anymore. When you were younger, making a tool meant survival. If your blade dulled, you sharpened it with care. If it broke, you learned how not to break the next one. Mistakes cost time, energy, sometimes blood. But here, mistakes are just replaced. A cracked scraper is left on a rock, and later, it vanishes, presumably fixed or discarded by someone you'll never meet. The cycle is seamless. Objects become background. The hands that make them, forgettable. There's a pouch you're given for carrying tinder. It's stitched from deer hide and bound with twisted sinew dyed red. You remember the first time you tried to make a pouch like that as a child. How the seams refused to hold, how the leather curled, how the whole thing fell apart after a week. You learn through failure. But this one? It's perfect. And you've done nothing to deserve it. Not here. Not yet. It unsettles you at first. Not because the tools are unearned, but because they are unquestioned. No one looks twice at a pile of bone awls or a row of shaped points. They're just there, like stones in a river. And you begin to wonder how it changes a person to never struggle with creation, to never stare down a piece of raw flint and ask it to become something more. You see it most clearly in the young. A boy, maybe 7 winters old, holds a spear that took someone hours to bind with sinew and wrap in beeswax thread. He doesn't grip it carefully. He spins it like a toy, laughs when the butt end clips a hide rack. No one scolds him. A few chuckle. The spear is replaced within the hour. You sit with one of the older men that evening, a carver with joints that crack when he moves. He tells you a story while smoothing a chunk of antler into a curved handle. He's not from here originally, you realize. His accent is faint, but different. You ask him if he still enjoys making things after all these years. He pauses, blade still in hand. I don't enjoy it, he says, but I need to know I still can. It stays with you, that phrasing, not enjoyment, not tradition, just the quiet need to be capable. You begin to notice which people carve their own tools and which don't, and more interestingly, who watches those who do. There's a tension in it, as if those with inherited warmth feel, somewhere deep down, the slow erosion of skill they never needed. Some respond by ignoring it. Others, like the old carver, chip away at bone in silence, not to prove anything, but to remember who they were before the fire became automatic. You handle your blade more carefully now. You oil the wood with fat, tighten the bindings, keep the edge dry. No one asks you to. No one praises you for it. But it's your way of staying tethered to memory, to process, to the idea that effort still matters. There's a small moment one morning when someone notices. A girl about your age, wrapped in thick furs, her cheeks wine-burned despite the comfort around her. She watches you tighten your spearhead binding and nods once before returning to her own task. She doesn't say a word, but that nod feels heavier than it should, like she's confirming something you didn't know needed confirming. The camp is full of those moments. Not big events, not dramatic scenes, just quiet acknowledgments. A flicker of understanding that, even here, where everything is provided, a few still remember the old rhythms. The satisfaction of shaping something with your own fingers. The comfort of knowing your warmth isn't just borrowed, it was earned. You begin to suspect that those closest to the fire aren't always the most secure. Their tools never dull, but neither do they sharpen their instincts. Their ease may breed contentment, but it also builds distance from the world beyond the camp's edge. And in a time when survival depends not only on warmth, but on resilience, you wonder what would happen if the tools stopped arriving, if the quiet workers vanished, if the ground shifted and ease had to be traded for grit again. Would they remember how to shape flint, to twist cordage, to make fire? Or would they sit by a cold hearth, waiting for someone else to arrive and solve the problem? It's a question that lingers in your chest as the firelight flickers higher. You trace a line along your blade's edge and let your breath slow. Somewhere in this camp, someone still sharpens stones by moonlight. You hope they never stop. But even tools, perfect and ready-made, can't protect from what creeps into a place where all needs are met. Boredom, like frost, finds the cracks. And in this camp, with its soft furs and steady meals, you're about to see how idle hands and safe minds find new ways to chase meaning, even if it means inventing struggle where none exists. You notice it slowly, not all at once. A rhythm begins to shift in the camp around you, quiet but unmistakable. People move with more purpose but less urgency, as though preparing not for work, but for something ceremonial. A few of the women begin setting aside extra portions from the morning's haul, soaking dried roots, plucking herbs, arranging the flattest bark platters where they won't be bent by heat or dampness. You don't ask why. It's clear that a feast is coming, and if the elders haven't explained it yet, it's because you're meant to already understand what this night is and who it's really for. By midday, the scent in the air changes. Smoke no longer smells of mere warmth or preservation, but of flavor. Fish oil crackling over the fire, honey thinned and drizzled over roasted tubers, meat slow cooked until its fibers nearly melt apart when pressed with a thumb. You watch as children are scrubbed more carefully than usual, their hair braided tightly, their faces dusted with a faint line of ochre down the nose or over the brow. Even the tools are arranged with care tonight, not left scattered after sharpening or dropped beside the fire. The mood is intense. It's anticipatory, like something has been promised that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. When the food begins to appear, it arrives not as a meal, but as an offering. The bowls are smoother. The pieces inside are whole, not broken. Seasoning is added, not because it's needed, but because it can be. You sit where you know you belong, just within the warmth of the fire, but far enough from its center that no one would mistake your presence for privilege. Your stew is hot and thick, flavored with something beyond salt, and for a moment, you allow yourself to savor it without thinking of who might have more. Still, you can't ignore the way others are served. The central circle, those closest to the heart of the clan, receive more than just food. Their portions gleam with fat, are carved with more care, are accompanied by tokens, slices of soft root, slivers of charred fruit, small hand-sized cuts that were clearly saved for them. It isn't ostentatious. That would be rude. But the hierarchy is obvious to anyone with eyes. And tonight, hierarchy is being displayed with grace instead of teeth. As people finish eating, a shift occurs, like a held breath finally released. The voices rise not in command, but in invitation. Someone steps forward carrying a wrapped object, a stone perhaps, or a finely carved piece of antler, and offers it not to the fire or to the gods, but to another person. The gift is given with both hands, its receiver bowing slightly before lifting it to their forehead. No words are exchanged. It is understood that the meaning of the gesture is more important than the object itself. One by one, more gifts emerge. A necklace made of pale river shells, smoothed into discs and strung on dyed sinew. A cloak clasp carved with a pattern too intricate to have been rushed. A tiny bowl painted with coiled lines in a red pigment that glows in the firelight. These things are beautiful, but beauty isn't the point. They are tokens of belonging, of favor, of silent allegiance. The givers are signaling their judgment. The receivers are marked, not just as worthy, but as visible. You receive nothing, and you expected nothing. But still, a feeling stirs in you, not quite envy, but awareness. You're on the outer ring of this generosity, warmed by the fire, but untouched by its flame. Later, someone sits beside you, an older man with a long scar across one cheek and eyes like clouded ice. He doesn't speak, but he reaches into the pouch at his belt and presses something into your hand. When you look, it's a smooth black pebble, cool and perfectly round, too small to be useful and too plain to be admired. He rises before you can thank him. The gesture is small, quiet, meant only for you, and it means more than it should. Then come the drums. Not sudden or loud, but steady. A heartbeat in the hands of someone who's been waiting for the moment all day. The beat begins slow and hollow, deep enough to stir the bones beneath your skin. People rise in response, not at once, but in a slow unfurling, like plants reaching toward sun they know will come. The first dancers are already moving before they're truly seen. Their steps are careful, deliberate, with the elegance of repetition, the kind of repetition that's rehearsed only through long seasons of unbroken tradition. The circle forms, wide and slow, orbiting the fire in turns and patterns. There's no leader at first, only a rhythm, and those willing to step into it. You join late, keeping to the outermost arc, watching more than moving. The movements seem simple, but you quickly realize their complexity is not in their speed, but in their meaning. Where feet are placed, how a hand turns during a pivot, when a body pauses or sways, each gesture is another form of language, and you are still learning how to speak it. Gradually, the dance reveals its true nature. This is not celebration. It is display. Each step is a chance to be seen, to affirm one's place. Those in the center are calm, fluid, graceful, even when their bodies are still. Around them, others move with slight hesitation, checking their rhythm against the strongest dancers. Laughter comes when someone stumbles, not mocking, but aware. The circle forgives mistakes, but it does not forget them. At one point, a woman near the center lifts her arms and twists into a spin, so smooth that the air around her seems to still. When she lands, someone nearby echoes the movement. It isn't imitation, it's challenge. The woman smiles, but doesn't repeat the step. Instead, she dances forward, her back to her mirror, as if to say, "Only the fire deserves to see me twice." The crowd responds not with noise, but with space. They move aside to let her pass, to give the moment room. This is how rank is negotiated here, not by command, but by grace. You dance as long as your legs will let you. Not well, without drawing notice, and in this circle, that's a kind of success. When the rhythm slows, when the feet begin to quiet, when the youngest children are cradled half asleep in the arms of their parents, you return to your place and sit. The stone is still in your hand. It has warmed against your skin. You don't remember holding it through the dance, but there it is. The fire has burned lower, its light no longer casting long shadows, but instead pooling gently around the seated forms that remain. You see faces lit softly, turned toward each other, speaking in murmurs that no longer carry the urgency of judgment. The gifts have been given. The dance is over, but its meaning will stretch into tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. These moments, feasts, gifts, dances, are not just rare interludes of joy. They are the fabric of power in a world where violence is not always necessary to secure your place. In this society, status can rise through elegance, visibility, subtle performance. Even a gesture, perfectly timed, can lift someone closer to the center. And if all goes well, one day you'll be invited not just to dance near the edge, but to guide the rhythm. Not because you fought or hunted or argued, but because you were watched. Because someone saw and remembered. The cold may shape your bones, and the hunt may shape your hands, but it's the stories that shape your mind. Not the kind etched into stone or recorded in ink. Those won't exist for tens of thousands of years, but the kind passed from mouth to mouth, fire to fire, across nights like this one, where the wind hums low and even the children have stopped whispering. Tonight, the storyteller takes their place near the flames, not at the center like a chief or hunter, but just to the side, where firelight can lick across their face, and their voice can catch every flicker of silence. No one announces the moment. There's no raised hand or ceremonial drumbeat. The storyteller simply clears their throat, a sound softer than a squirrel's chatter, and suddenly the fire crackles a little louder and the voices hush without effort. It's not command that quiets the circle. It's gravity, a kind that pulls not with force, but with the anticipation of something shared. The storyteller doesn't rush. They lean forward, elbows on knees, voice low, their eyes scanning the fire rather than the crowd. And slowly, the story unfolds. It's not short, and it's not linear. It moves like a river down a valley, twisting through exaggeration and memory, an ancestral echo. It begins with a wolf with too many teeth and a girl who walked into the snow against her mother's orders. The wolf becomes a man. The girl becomes a grandmother. The moral changes depending on which version they choose to tell. The story, like the fire, is alive. You sit in the half-dark, bowl empty, hands curled around your knees, and feel something shift. This isn't entertainment. It's instruction disguised in magic. Somewhere beneath the rhythm of the tale is a warning, or a hope, or a truth so old it can't be given plainly. The children hear monsters. The hunters hear a metaphor. The elders hear regret. And all of it is correct. The storyteller is not the strongest among the group, nor the best fed, nor the most adorned. Their tunic is plain, their hair unremarkable. They do not dance like the fire circle elite, nor do they eat with the central ring. But when they speak, they hold the group in a way no spear ever could. Their voice bends time. Their hands sketch the shape of things long gone. And as they speak, you realize something unusual. They're not reciting a list of facts or events. They're building a world that never existed exactly as they say, but one that everyone here remembers, somehow, just the same. A gasp breaks from one of the younger children. The story has turned, just enough to become dangerous. A betrayal is unfolding. A spirit has been wronged. The wind in the real world picks up a little, as if pulled by the cadence of the tale. You catch your own breath. You know the danger isn't real, but your body doesn't. Your muscles have tensed anyway. And then, a shift. The storyteller lets silence hang just long enough for discomfort to settle. Then they laugh, a short, dry thing, and the audience laughs too, relieved, because now the danger is past. The story swells into its conclusion, not with a grand flourish, but with a slow winding down, like a tree root finding stillness in the earth. When it ends, there is no applause, just the gentle exhale of people returning to their own bodies. You glance around. No one has moved. The bowl in your lap is cold. Your feet are numb. And still, you feel a kind of warmth. Not the kind that sits on your skin, but the kind that glows beneath it. The story is still inside you, threading itself through your thoughts. You'll remember it, not exactly as it was told, but as your own mind chooses to preserve it. The storyteller doesn't ask for payment. They stand slowly, stretch like a tree in winter, and move toward the shadows at the edge of the camp. No one stops them. No one thanks them. That would make it too small. Instead, a few of the younger ones begin to mimic the tale in low voices, reshaping it already. This time, the wolf is the girl's sister, and the snow speaks instead of kills. The story, like all the best ones, has already changed. You've seen hunters kill a beast twice their size. You've seen a woman stitch a tear in a hide so seamlessly that no one could find the seam. But this is something else entirely. The storyteller kills nothing, stitches nothing, yet leaves the night transformed. And somewhere inside that transformation lies power, the kind that doesn't need a weapon, doesn't need a title, and doesn't need permission. In a world where cold is constant and death is often a misstep away, you begin to see how memory might become its own kind of survival. Not just what you know, but how you say it. Who remembers you? Whether you mattered in the world someone else creates around the fire once you're gone. The stars have shifted above your head, marking the late hour. The drums are silent now. The fire has dimmed to coals. People rise in pairs, in silence, brushing the last crumbs from their cloaks. You sit still a moment longer, the story still coiling around your spine like a sleeping serpent. You don't want to move. Not because you're tired, but because this moment feels like a doorway, and stepping away from it might mean forgetting how it felt to stand inside. You think of the storyteller's voice, its texture, its rhythm, the way it slowed at the end. You think about how even those who outranked them still leaned forward when they spoke. You think about how power, in a place like this, isn't always loud or sharp. Sometimes it whispers and waits. Soon you'll rise. You'll curl beneath your furs, listening to the wind pick through the camp, and your dreams will carry fragments of what you heard. But for now, you sit near the dying fire, one more silent figure wrapped in smoke and story, and wonder whether there's a tale inside you too, waiting for its night. You don't notice the politics at first. It doesn't shout. It doesn't wear a crown or wave a carved baton. It's more like a shifting of wind, a slight turn of posture when someone enters the circle. A laugh just a little too loud at the wrong moment. A silence that lands heavier than a spoken answer. You're not entirely sure what changed. Only that the fire suddenly feels warmer or colder, depending on who just sat beside it. And soon, you realize the clan's world is arranged not only by kinship or skill, but by something older and more delicate, an invisible web of alliances, favors, and power measured in glances rather than words. Each day, the rhythm of camp life seems ordinary enough. People dig, tan hides, scrape bark, prepare meals, and go off to hunt in small groups. But you begin to notice who goes with whom. There's a woman whose spear has a deeper notch near the point, and somehow she always ends up beside the elder's grandson, her position closer to the kill. There's an old man who speaks very little, but never waits in line for food. When there's a decision to be made, who will go to the river, who will scout the forest trail, no votes are taken. Instead, a few murmured exchanges occur between the higher-ranked hunters and elders, and the rest of the group adjusts silently. Partnerships, you begin to understand, are not just practical arrangements. They are strategies. Who shares your fire at night might determine who speaks up for you when a dispute arises. Who you bring meat to first might influence who brings bark mats to your tent when the rain comes early. Even sitting too long beside the wrong person, someone who has fallen out of favor or misstepped in the hunt, can stain your reputation like old soot. You're learning that in a world without written laws, the rules are no less real. They just live in bodies and glances and the space between shared meals. And then there is the matter of pairing off. Mating in this world is not only about reproduction. It is economics. It is alliance. It is performance. You've seen two people laugh beside the fire for days, sharing pieces of fish or throwing pebbles at the same sleeping dog. Then, with no announcement, they stop speaking. One shares a fur with someone else the next night, and the first never mentions it again. There are no marriages, not in the ceremonial sense, but there are bonds, strong ones, that carry influence. A skilled toolmaker's daughter is more likely to share her mat with a hunter who brings back clean kills. A healer might partner with someone who has status enough to ensure protection and comfort for their aging mother. Sometimes pairings are permanent. Sometimes they last only a season. But in every case, they shift the dynamics of the group. A new partnership can realign loyalties. An unexpected union can dislodge someone from favor. This person who once sat near the fire's center might now linger at the edge. That person who used to be overlooked suddenly finds themselves in every conversation. You learn to watch who carries food to whom, who laughs with whose children, who leaves the camp together in the early dawn. Prestige, you discover, is not always won by skill. Sometimes it's inherited. Sometimes it's performed. Sometimes it's earned in subtle, daily gestures. The way someone listens when others speak, the way they give the best cuts of meat away without seeming weak, the way their advice is taken, even when it contradicts others. One young man, not especially strong, not especially clever, commands attention simply by standing still and waiting for others to speak first. His quiet makes others nervous, so they fill it. In that way, he learns more than most. And knowledge, in this world, is a kind of power. The elders understand all of this better than anyone. They don't interfere, not directly, but their eyes miss nothing. When they assign hunting parties or suggest who should accompany whom on a journey, their choices are not random. They reinforce the balance they prefer, quietly favoring those who play the unspoken game well. And those who don't, those who speak too loudly, who hoard food, who fail to notice when someone needs help, find themselves gently nudged to the outside, further from the fire, closer to the shadows. You think again of the storyteller, not high-ranked by hunting standards, not a decision-maker, but even they participate in this silent exchange. Their stories shift subtly depending on who is present. One night, a tale ends with the clever trickster outwitting the mighty hunter. Another night, the story changes, and the hunter is noble while the trickster falters. The audience laughs either way, but the meaning lands differently depending on who it's meant for. Influence in this world isn't just about strength. It's about understanding where to place your words, your gifts, your body. There's a moment near the edge of camp one evening when you catch sight of two women sharing a strip of meat behind a drying rack. They're speaking low, eyes flicking now and then toward the main fire. You're too far to hear the words, but their posture says enough. An alliance is being built. Maybe it's old, maybe it's new, but you see in their stance the shape of influence, gentle, deliberate, growing. And just like that, you begin to see it everywhere, not just in the gifted tools or shared skins, but in silences, in pauses, in who fetches water and who is asked, even softly, to stay behind. Politics here is not loud, it is not named, but it is everywhere, sewn into the scenes of the camp like sinew into hide. As you settle in for the night, curling beneath a shared blanket with someone who's been offering you bark for kindling the last few mornings, you feel the shape of it all settling around you. These people are not just surviving, they're maneuvering. They're sculpting futures with gestures and placement and presence. The warmth of the fire is real. The relationships around it are warmer still, but far more complicated. And in a place where nature offers little safety and time itself is measured by the lean of stars and the depth of ice, the quiet art of social strategy may be the oldest tool of all. The elite of the camp, the best fed, the most adorned, the ones whose tools are never self-made, seem untouchable in the warm seasons. They carry themselves with the comfort of those who've never had to ask for anything twice. When meat is scarce, it finds its way into their bowls first. When new hides are stretched and stitched, they receive the softest ones. dyed and patterned in ways that don't just keep out the wind, but announce identity. They are the ones who decide who gets to sit closer to the fire and who is gently directed to the edge. Their laughter is listened to, their moods anticipated. It's easy, from the outer ring of the circle, to think they have solved the Ice Age, that they've domesticated the cold with stories and fur cloaks and bowls that are never truly empty. But then the days shorten, not in theory, but in ache. The air takes on a different kind of silence, one that hums at the edge of your hearing and makes everything sound more distant. The wind comes with teeth, and even those who mock superstition step carefully, listening for shifts in the forest, like prey animals unsure of their rank in the food chain. Snow doesn't arrive with ceremony. It arrives with indifference. It falls like ash, soft and constant, until the paths between shelters vanish, and the forest seems to have stepped back, folding its edges inward to wait you out. In the coldest weeks, you begin to see it. Even the highest ranked glance toward the food stores with something like uncertainty. Their shoulders tighten as they pass the smoke vents, worried about what will burn and for how long. The face paint fades, the posture slackens. One elder known for his elaborate tailies suddenly goes quiet, speaking only when asked. Another, who usually doles out praise in deliberate, careful doses, now watches the meat racks with narrowed eyes and counts quietly with his fingers. You understand now that prestige has limits. It softens the edge of discomfort, but it does not erase it. The cold is not impressed by lineage or graceful dancing, or the carved antler pendant around your neck. It will sink into every bone without prejudice. Even the warmest furs lose their charm when the wind finds the gap at your neck. Even the favored mat beside the fire becomes useless if the woodpile runs low. A child falls sick. Not your child, but one of the inner circles, one of the well-fed ones, the decorated ones. A cough begins deep in her chest and soon spreads like frost through the shelter. The healer comes with paste and steam and sings over her breath. But the fear in the room isn't about medicine. It's about pattern. Everyone knows how this season goes. The first child coughing means others will follow. And if enough of them do, the ice may carry more than just chill. It may carry silence. In these days, alliances fray. Not openly, but in the way someone forgets to share. In the way, tools aren't passed around, but clutched tighter. You see two of the camp's inner circle arguing over a pile of firewood. Not loudly, not even angrily. But there's a tension in their voices, like bark stretched too far across a frame. Each insists the wood is theirs. Each insists they gathered it, and no one offers to mediate. The storyteller still speaks, but the stories are different now. Gone are the trickster gods and the swaggering ancestors. Now come the quiet stories, the ones about the family who made it through a winter by eating bark and sleeping stacked like spoons. The ones about a mother who lost 3 children and still sang every night because her voice was all that kept the 4th from slipping away. These are not entertainment. They are memory. And they are a kind of prayer. You begin to carry wood more often, not because you're told to, but because the cold does not wait for permission. The leaders no longer watch you with soft approval or distant praise. They just watch, and they do not object when your arms are full. That alone is a shift. You were once a guest. Now you are one more figure in the line of survival. Equality, it turns out, is not granted. It is carved for need. In the sharpest cold, when your fingers feel too stiff to curl, and your breath comes in plumes that sting your lips, you see a woman who once danced at the center of the fire ring squatting over a frozen pit, trying to break through the crust of ice with a stone. Her cloak is rich, her hands ringed with bone jewelry, but she curses quietly like anyone else, and when she slips, no one rushes to help. Not because they don't care, but because everyone is now equally tired. The winter, for all its blunt cruelty, is also a kind of equalizer. It scrapes away the polish of social performance. It shows who can endure and who can adapt. And it reveals something rarely spoken aloud, that status is only a shelter when the world agrees to let it be one. When the wind says otherwise, no circle of warmth can protect you for long. Still, it doesn't strip everything. Even in these nights, someone starts a song, quietly, a hum more than a melody. Someone else joins, then another. The fire crackles, and for a moment, the sound is enough. Not powerful, not grand, but enough. You think about what you've learned here, in this strange and frozen chapter of humanity. The way prestige ebbs and flows with the season. The way people balance hunger and hope, tradition and adaptation. The way stories outlast even the thickest snow. You think about the bones in the earth beneath you, left behind by people who once danced, once feared, once hoped just like this. And as the camp settles once more beneath its blankets of fur and silence, you begin to understand why this world, harsh as it is, still matters. Because within it are the seeds of everything that came after. From firelight to hierarchy, from stories to status, from the scrape of stone tools to the shape of your own thoughts, this world built the frame we still carry. And that quiet realization that you are not separate from this ancient winter, but descended from it, leads us gently into our final thoughts tonight. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the silent desperation of a lone figure stumbling through snowdrifts to the steady warmth of a shared, fire-deep in the Ice Age night, we've followed the path from isolation to community, from raw survival to something more human. We've walked beside Cro-Magnon hunters and watched alliances form beneath the stars. We've listened to stories that outlived the voices that once told them, and felt the cold settle even among those who seemed safest. A long, slow walk through the wind-bitten edges of our shared beginnings. If you're still awake, I'm grateful you stayed with me through it all. And if you drifted off somewhere between the crackle of firewood and the quiet shuffle of feet in the snow, that's completely fine too. That's part of what this space is for. If this slower, sleep-friendly kind of history speaks to you, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more journeys like this. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it was when you pressed play. Your comments help me picture the little corners of the world where these quiet stories land. For now, I'll let the torchlight fade from the cave walls, the footsteps vanish into soft snow, and the embers of that ancient fire settle into stillness. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.